by the way. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Call your people for a meeting, agree what you're going to do, and then, stick to it and let's keep it moving.
Exactly.
Wewe iko salama leo asubuhi?
Nashukuru sana.
Okay, I'm very happy.
Sana. I was actually shocked that the roads were wet. I'm like, I didn't hear nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exhaustion will do that to you sometimes.
You slept. There are those who argue you slept soundly.
Soundly.
Like a baby.
Yeah.
So you did well.
Yeah.
City, has anyone told you? And think carefully before you answer this. Knowing.
Has anyone told me lately or has anyone told me generally?
At all.
Right,
Now think carefully as I'm telling you this thing, so that you know that how you are answering is for the benefit of the person who is asking the question, because it will do something for her. Sawa. Has anyone ever told you how wonderful you look in this bright mustard yellow color?
Yes.
I told you to think about the person who is asking the question and what it will do for her gratification.
The person who asked me the question has told me this before.
This person, Cindy, you see, now that is why that's a perfect answer.
So that's why I had to think about it.
It's like that was a trick question, though.
Exactly. Actually looks splendid in that color, CT, and you should get more in that color. It brings out your Ninio.
Brings the color in me.
Silver folk.
It brightens my cheek.
Those things, it brings out your eyes.
My eyes.
I keep saying silver folk. Ogopa.
This one. I'm telling you for free. Lakini wewe iko salama leo asubuhi?
Daddy kabisa.
Kabisa.
Yes.
Bugdha.
Your memory is good.
Thanks.
Bugda.
Hey. Only throw in 1,000.
Exactly. And Fursa inside there somewhere. Kiswahili is such an interesting language. Well, now that we've established that everybody's all right, that we just have to do the checks. We are well and welcome to 12 minutes after 6, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed and ready to face the day. Kenya's biggest conversation starts now. Seatbelt up. It's going to be a fun ride. Edna is here. But let me tell you, today my job is to keep Edna up and about. In addition to other things. I can't see you waving. Bas. And then there's Lydia, who is looking nice in pink. Wait, she's not there. She ran away. She went to the other side. Resplendent in fuchsia. She ran away to the other side. But then, people in the back end making things happen. Even Frank is there. I can see Frank.
No, Dida Mwakirani.
Yeah, Edna is with Frank there.
Yes, Dida is his name, isn't it?
Yes.
Mwakirani. You're Frank Tupa, I told you.
Frankie. Do you remember me, Frankie? Such an old song. But anyway, lest we make the man feel shy at 6:12 in the morning, let's just keep it moving, shall we? We don't forget about, the stuff that happens in the back end is the only way that this show can actually get on, and many of the shows. So we have to always remember that. Okay, so a number of conversations that we will be having this morning, and let's let you in on that. Look, also, we know that guys are already clicking into the room. Our live streams are up, YouTube, Facebook, and on X. Something is tickling CT, and he'll let you know what that is later, of course. But how about I tell you about the conversations that we will be having this morning, shall we? Iki piki ponki.
Father had a donkey.
Donkey died, father cried, iki piki ponki. Such things, but it was done in Luo.
Yeah,
later.
Piki ponki.
Something Luet.
No, it's Paka.
Paka imefanya nini?
Paka Melo Disco.
Bas, Paka Melo Disco. Yeah. Lawyer Willis Otieno, who is actually the running mate for Jimmy Wajigi in the previous election, is going to be here with us at 7 o'clock. He has had a number of things to say in the recent past in terms of keeping governance righteous and accountable. He'll join us at that time as we're talking about reconstituting the IEBC. The transparency and fairness question comes up this morning at 7. And then at 8 o'clock, we'll be talking about Kenya at a crossroads on its human rights situation. Look, guys, we can't run away from the situation that's going on. People disappearing, others turning up dead, people just missing, nobody asking questions, rather people asking questions but not being given the answers in terms of what's happening, people coming into the country on state visits, and the number one thing they talk about is not your development projects but your human rights status. And Wallace Nderu, who is a research and advocacy advisor of the Defenders Coalition, will join us for that conversation at 8. And finally at 9 a.m, autism is a big issue. Autism in adults usually, almost always, has started in children, a developmental condition, and we'll be looking at that today with Dr. Jane Moirori, who is a healthcare management expert, and Perpetua Mondi, who is the founder of the Dynamic Occupational Therapy Limited, and we'll be talking about the other side of autism. Many today realize that their children, their siblings have autism and not quite sure how to deal with it. So we'll be having that conversation today at 9. It's packed to the rafters. We're ready to go, and we're going to say hello to you in a minute as you join us on these conversations. Sawa. All right, so that's what we'll be talking about today. And as we say hello to you, thank you always for joining us every morning. And even as you do, tell us where you're tuned in from, and just say hello to everybody, and it'll be nice to just click in with you guys today. Sawa. So let's start off with who's in the room this morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. My phone has decided not to do the thing. Okay, so I'm already laughing. King Dave Lubale says good morning once again. Welcome back, great ones. Well, good to always have you, King, in the room. Karibu Sana. Good morning, Team Spice. May God continue to give you boldness when dissecting national interest issues. Bila Bugda. Hezbon. Good morning. Okay, so let's agree. What does Bugda actually mean? I just like the word. What does it mean?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
Bugda is like bila shida.
Oh,
no
okay.
Problems.
No problems.
Yeah.
Bila Bugda.
Yeah.
Okay.
No issues.
Sawa.
Yeah.
Bila Bugda. Dennis Kiprop says, bonjour, monsieur et madame. Good morning to you. Tibbs Muge, we see you. Good morning. Bonjour, mes amis. Bonjour, Michael Olande. Tony Mohoho says, pansa, my good people. Pansa, c'est quoi?
Pansa, oui.
What's pansa?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like a song.
It's a song.
No habla pansa.
Oh, no habla español. No habla pansa. Je ne comprends pas pansa. Okay. Good morning, beautiful people, says Patriotic. Mupo Spice. Siku njema tumwendele na kazi nzuri hivyo. Thank you so much, Rose Grace. Always good to have you in the room. Ann Gore says, good morning. She says, it's from the beautiful city of Nairobi. It's raining, it's pouring. Right now, because we're inside, we can't really tell what's going on out there. But it was God in heaven. It would seem as though the heavens have opened. Abera Bethwell says, good morning, Team Spice. I'm happy to have tuned in from Kilifi County. Goons on the rampage. Where? I know. Crazy. Good morning, team. Tibbs, good morning to you. Dennis Kiprop, yes, we see you. Tuned in from Embu, we love you. Thank you so much, Daniel Jagona Kamau. Robert Mbogo says, good morning. Robert, we know you're in Mombasa. Good morning, Spice community. On time for the ultimate show. John Gishuki, good morning. John, remind us where you're tuned in from, please. I keep forgetting, but always to have having you here is great. Dan Steele Langat says, good morning. It's spicy here in Kepkelion, Kericho. Bonjour from hot and steamy Kilifi. Atieno, really? Tuning from Naivasha, says Jimmy Munuthi. Josh Ntayaya says, good morning. I love that name. Rahim Tula Omar says, good morning from the UK. Edna, I should just tell them they should not be calling you my love. They should just call you Edna. They should respect us. Abi? But they said good morning. But I said my lobe. I don't know if you're his ear lobe, but I think it means love because B and V are next to each other on the keyboard. My ear lobe.
Fat fingers.
That's something like that. Awilo Garang says, good morning, tuning in from Masaku. Pierre in Diani, good morning to you. And good morning, team. The transition to summer up at Doha is similar to the Kenyan government transition to opposition. Diani? Pierre is tuned in from Diani, bwana. Unataka nisema nini? Icelandic says, good morning. Good morning from Kisumu City. Great chilly weather after many days of heat, says Billy Sibor. Irene Wanjohi is tuned in. Regards to you all. And Edna. All and Edna. It's like the rest of you over there and then Edna. Sawa too. Good morning, guys. Tuned in. Erica War, good morning. Tony Mohoho tells us that Femi Kuti was a revolutionary. He said, pansa, meaning tell them more and more till they can't hear no more. Oh, it is a song. It's true. Pansa. It is true. Femi Kuti actually did, his music was...
Femi Kuti, son of Fela Kuti.
Yes.
Good for him.
Yeah. his father actually started with singing. People thought his music was just entertainment, but he did a lot of
that man. Yes, he was in the civic space.
He was. He was. It was politics. It was governance. It was revolution. It was change.
He has a shrine, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
yes.
which has actually brought up a lot of great artists like Burna Boy and whatnot.
Exactly. If you listen to Burna Boy's music, actually, the soul of his music is very much like Fela Kuti's music, right? So,
who?
Burna Boy.
Burna Boy.
Oh,
Burna, yes.
Is it spelled B-U-R-N-A?
Yes.
Okay.
They call me Burna. Say boy.
Odogu.
Maybe I've heard of the song.
Not that one, but I'm sure you've heard.
Yes, it's very likely.
It don't cast. Last. Everybody go chop breakfast. Shayo.
City.
No.
Blank.
Okay.
I'll think of another one. Yeah.
Tell me about Ransom Fela Kuti.
Ransom Fela Kuti, you know.
I know.
No, Allah. Let's leave.
If you tell a woman, African woman, she go say, Abiledio.
See, every day you come up with something that just floors me. Hey, she go say, Abiledio. Hey, come on. Hey. Joseph Mwaneke. Hey, because if we don't stop, we won't stop. Good morning from Gatito Nyeri. Too much rain here. Rain is good, man. Good morning to Edna only. Sawa basi. Tumekubali. Sorry, bus. Don't be angry. Waiting for CT's proverb, says Omar, and Brian Oginga says good morning. Tuned in from Israel. Yom Tov Haverim. Indeed. People just keep coming in. Okay, so Arnold O, Georgia Koth, Asante. Atieno says we make her happy. Atieno, I wouldn't lie to you, sister. You make us happy too. Everybody, good morning and karibuni sana. CT, yesterday we entered into Mauritania.
The Islamic Republic of Mauritania.
Nouakchott.
Yeah.
Actually, no, often say you don't pronounce the last letter, so that you always only stop with the pronunciation of the penultimate letter. So in this case, you would pronounce the T, and one would assume it's only the first T that you're pronouncing. So we allow you to pronounce the T in Nouakchott.
It's Nouakchott.
Yes.
How did they come up with this idea of you pronounce this one and you don't pronounce that one? And it's their language.
See, they can do whatever they want.
They can pronounce what they want.
Yes.
Proverb from the same country. If you watch your pot, your food will not burn.
Pretty much like if you keep on looking at your milk, it will not spill. But the moment you just blink,
that thing, I don't know how.
I don't understand how that thing happened. In fact, it happened to me on Sunday. I was looking at the thing like
you
this.
Do this,
You're
you
just
turn.
okay. Yeah, the thing has over.
Yes.
yeah.
That's just think about it. Actually, that just in life, even like now in my mind, certain things that are happening with me. That because I didn't watch the pot, I just got careless, isn't it? You don't watch the pot, you get careless.
Believe me, and it often happens because that pot has served you well before.
Kabisa.
So you assume
it's okay. I can just
it's on auto.
Yeah.
It just keep serving you.
Yeah.
And then it surprises you.
Yeah.
When you don't watch it.
If you don't watch it, it will definitely surprise you.
Be vigilant over everything, small, large. Very, very interesting.
Surprising it is, especially in this country. The pot has not been watched. Starting things nicely.
Well, that will be interesting to hear how people interpret that this morning. And as we get into it, how about we look into the headlines today? And we start off with Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard, today. Goons go on rampage. That's what's the headline. A growing wave of targeted attacks against government critics is spreading across the country, defying the very essence of law and order. The perpetrators, bold goons, often chant slogans in support of top politicians as police stand and watch. This trend has raised concerns that Kenya's democratic space is shrinking, with dissenting voices facing greater threats. I mean, social media was awash yesterday with who hired who to do what on Sunday with when. And, allegations all over the place just because a certain individual had said things And in this case, hired goons attacked mourners at a village in Bibirioni village, Limuru, where former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua was in attendance. Hired somebody to sort him out. Mumia's East MP Peter Salasya is led away to safety by police officers after he was attacked at the Nyayo National Stadium during a match between Kenya and Gabon on Sunday. Remember the things that he had said before? He said, come on, these guys are playing you, man. And then that happens to him. Ex-Mungiki leader, supporters of ex-Mungiki leader Maina Njenga, when they stormed and disrupted a prayer meeting convened by Pastor Dorcas Rigathi at Kamkunji grounds in Nyeri. Peter Salasya, his quote, "What happened was planned. They took advantage because they knew I would come. The moment I entered, someone warned me at the gate." That was sad to see. So we'll look into the details of that story. Yeah. Goons are becoming a thing of it today. Are you surprised that the courts have exposed an Athi House land scam? Bum, 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 bum. There's a land scam going on at Athi House. Okay, that's like saying...
Is it a continuation of what has been happening?
Exactly. It's like saying...
Or is it something brand new?
It's like saying we've been using flour to make bread. Okay, fine.
What happened to digitizing all the documents at Athi House?
Man.
We've had many stories regarding that, and we asked a simple question once when we had the CS for land aid. We asked, we understand what you're saying, but the human element... How do you protect the system from the human element?
How do you do that? Digital or not? Digitized or not? How do you...
You know, one of the most digitalized countries in the world, Estonia. They've digitalized everything except two things. Land, marriage. You have to present yourself.
Because they know.
They know this one. These two things.
Can't put it in a computer, man.
There are things in the computer, but you have to come.
You come.
We have to see you.
It is. I'll give you the details of that story when we come back into it. US warns on Kenya's food security. Okay, sour. So there are many issues around food security, and food security is not just will you have enough for the next 25 years. It's also around issues of nutrition and looking at the sources that you have. Are they sustainable? Are they strong sources, and strong in the sense that will they provide the kind of nutrition that you need? We'll look into that. So the Safari Rally came to an end, and we know who the winner of that was. But drivers Tundo and Wahome lift the ARC flag. We'll look into details of some of those later.
Yeah, let's go to the Daily Nation. And the headline on the Daily Nation, Uhuru's 26 billion shillings CBC blunder. Now, a 25.8 billion shillings World Bank project to build schools infrastructure launched during former President Uhuru Kenyatta's second term has returned to haunt President William Ruto's Kenya Kwanza administration as learners continue to suffer, with taxpayers now set to pay for the past mistakes of state officials. Matters to do with education being mismanaged every day in the country. But that is, we'll get deeper into that as we progress. And what I have learned about life and friends. Now, this is former Kiambu Governor Ferdinand Waititu has grown tired of monotonous head counts before daybreak, in the afternoon and sundown during the warder's shift changes. Save for a special accommodation, he goes through the usual routine the other inmates face. I have just come out of mid-morning service at Christian International Church, as there is not much you can do here, he says, after a brief chat on how his morning was. The church is domiciled inside the prison. The minute you get inside here, you realize that you are alone. You realize the people you thought were your real friends are just but acquaintances.
Okay. Let's look at the headlines, Justin, then we can come into the stories, right?
Now let's go to Kupet coup on NAT as 46,000 junior school teachers join the union. And we have Kanja promises impartial probe following month's fatal shooting by bodyguard of top State House aide. And Kawira Mwangaza, my Oster, is Ruto's only finished project in Meru.
Ouch.
But Kanja, that is a reporting.
Yeah.
Someone is suggesting that he promises, what again?
Promises impartial probe following man's fatal shooting.
So other probes that we've had are what exactly?
Are they partial?
Well, why are you promising this? They are supposed to be impartial.
Always.
So why
you shouldn't have to say that it was going to be
why are you telling us that this one is going to be
Perhaps
impartial?
because it's from a state house aide. Let's just, it's a state house spokesperson, Hussein Mohammed's bodyguard shot someone 7 times.
Ouch.
So I think based on the fact that it's someone of influence, perhaps.
That's bad news.
Yeah.
It is. We'll look into the details of that. City?
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Fine.
Fantastic. Sasa we'll see you to pay headlines, but
Right. A Business Daily. US says red tape leaks hurting Kenya's financial crimes fight. Oh. Let me just read this. The Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions has been thrust into the spotlight after the US government said that bureaucracy and information leaks are hurting the fight against financial crimes, including money laundering.
okay.
Okay, this is from a government. Okay.
Yeah.
These guys, pot calling the kettle black.
It would appear.
Good for you. A little hypocrisy every now and then makes life interesting, isn't it?
It stirs the soul.
Yeah, it's good to be two-faced. TransCentury taps KPMG in Equity Bank debt restructure plan. Good for you. Nairobi Prime go down, rent flat on manufacturing woes. Goy. Rental charges for Prime Warehouse Nairobi have stagnated, meaning they're not moving. Neither left nor right. Neither up nor down. Not a good thing here.
Nope.
KCB Group buys 75% stake in ex-FKF Bosses fintech company. KCB has inked an agreement to acquire a majority stake in an IT firm associated with former football Kenya Federation President Nick Mwenda in a deal insiders said will be worth 2 billion. Okay. Bang in the middle. No, not quite. The best project governance. This is a quote.
Okay.
The best project governance structures are those that align with the culture of accountability and transparency, like the last one, and agility. Meaning, apart from being accountable and transparent, you must be agile.
Yeah,
you must be nimble-footed. Right now, bang in the middle of the paper, Treasury to repay 114 billion loans from Eurobond cash. What are they saying? Syndicated loans are due for payment in September and October this year, not next year, this year. Mbadi keen on getting expensive debts off exchequer books. He is keen. He is very, very keen. All right, let me get keen on the Star. Today, the Star is free. Doesn't cost a penny. Bang smoking bully who killed mother over drugs, jailed for 25 years. Story on page 3. Agribusiness. New tomato variety to boost yields and put cash in farmers' pockets. That's a story on page 10. Bang in the middle of the paper. Funds wasted as citizens denied much needed development. This is a story on page 4 and 5. Multi-billion projects stall. This is not the first time we've heard or read about this. So we can take the view that this is a continuation of what has gone on.
It is a continuum.
God.
It is. It definitely. Here.
When, Father? When? When can we just finish, man? Well, okay. So many stories to look at. Let's take a break and see what's happening now with traffic on the roads now that the heavens have opened. And we'll come back and look at some of these stories in more detail. It is now 27 minutes to 7 o'clock. Kenya's biggest conversation. We'll be back after this.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. The weather with SpiceFM.
Looking into weather conditions in Nairobi, it is a rainy morning and we will see highs of 26 and lows of 17 through the day. And then into a partly cloudy Nakuru 13, highs of 25, and we'll see highs of 24 in a cloudy Nyeri at 15. Clear at 12 in Eldoret with highs of 26. And we're looking into a sunny Mombasa at 27 with sunny conditions at 27 in Malindi. It's 19 and cloudy in Kisumu, while at 16, Kakamega is cloudy. Clear at 19 into Kampala with highs of 27, while Dar es Salaam at 25 is sunny going to highs of 32. Johannesburg is clear at 7 with highs of 26, while Mogadishu at 26 is partly sunny. It's 14 and sunny into Addis Ababa with highs of 22, while Lagos is hazy at 27. Kinshasa is mostly clear at 25. We're looking into a sunny Beijing into Tuesday mid-morning and highs of 21, while it's 9 degrees and cloudy in Paris. It's 6 degrees and cast in London. Heavy, mostly clear conditions in New York at 8. Coming into Tuesday, highs of 10 and lows of 6.
Spice FM. Spice up your life.
All right, so what changes do we have now? A little bit of movement coming in on the Thika Superhighway, and that's going to take you through towards the Pangani Underpass. But now it doesn't look too crazy. We're seeing some inbound traffic on Outer Ring, trying to find its way to the Thika Superhighway, as well as traffic on Kangunda Road coming in from Jiru and then out towards Outer Ring. Apart from that, nothing much clicking at the moment. We will see some traffic that's coming in on Naivasha Road, and it's going to find its way towards Ngong Road at some point. But for now, doesn't look too bad, and let's keep an eye on things and talk on SpiceFM KE on X, hashtag the Situation Room.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Hiya. All right, so you want to ask yourself a question, what's happening at Ardhi House? Well, the court has exposed the scam fueled by corrupt officials and cartels. It is a long story, but let me give you a few of the details. A recent landmark ruling by the Court of Appeal has unmasked the depth of fraudulent dealings at the Land Ministry, exposing how powerful cartels manipulate land records, forge titles, and facilitate illegal transactions, leaving countless legitimate landowners dispossessed. Where? Nancy Gitonga tells this story. For decades, the Ministry of Lands has been at the heart of a storm plagued by fraud, illegal transactions, and rampant manipulation of land records. It sounds like a movie. It is not. It is Kenya. At the center of this controversy stands Ardhi House, the ministry's Nairobi headquarters, where well-connected cartels operate with impunity, robbing innocent landowners of their rightful property. A recent ruling by the Court of Appeal has revealed the extent to which unscrupulous cartels have infiltrated the ministry. These cartels, consisting of corrupt officers and middlemen, have allegedly been altering land titles, forging signatures, issuing fraudulent title deeds, and even disappearing critical land records to pave the way for illegal acquisitions. It gets better. The consequences of these actions have been devastating. Genuine landowners have been dispossessed of their property, and innocent people have found themselves embroiled in lengthy, costly, forced battles that can take years to resolve. So, in a landmark judgment, the Court of Appeal exposed these illicit practices and called for accountability within the Ministry of Lands, particularly Ardhi House. The Court of Appeal President David Musinga, alongside Justices Katharima Mnoti and Fred Ochieng, in a unanimous decision, took the rare step of publicly highlighting the role of rogue officers within the land registries. Now, it's a story that I think if you grab a copy of Kenya's Bold newspaper today, you'll be able to read this story in its entirety. But the thing for me is that making public the role is a fantastic step. What would be step number 2 is naming the individuals who did it. Yeah. Because what that does for you is that you are then aware of who this is so that they don't do it again. So it has been exposed, but has it been exposed who did it? Has it been exposed who now is liable to pay back? Or are such things supposed to be kept under wraps? So it's a landmark ruling. It's true because it's never happened before and not in this way. 70 years is the number of years that some families have been looking or rather been holding property that belonged to somebody else because of fake and fraudulent titles. I mean, it goes on and on. It gives many examples of how people have lost their property, how others have, faked title deeds, and the fake title deeds are what actually are in Ardhi House. My goodness, it's beyond a cartel. It's like Bonnie and Clyde all over again, but within the offices of the ministry. So I don't know that this ruling is necessarily going to stop the bleed, but maybe what it does is that it shines a light and that people will now be able to retract from such behavior. But I think that the names should be named. I do.
True.
I do.
True. So, you know that every 5 years Kenyans elect individuals to lead them, right? And, and they're expected to do their job, attend sittings and whatnot. But Kingi has warned absentee senators over an alarming rate of absenteeism from the chambers. In a task statement, Senate Speaker Amason Kingi noted that an increasing number of senators no longer attend sittings even when their business is listed on the order paper. To cover their unbecoming conduct, Mr. Kingi said the legislators have been requesting their colleagues to prosecute the matters on their behalf without adhering to the standing orders. The Speaker said the errant senators have been abusing the provisions of Standing Order 51C Part 2, which states that a senator may in writing nominate another to ask a question on his or her behalf. It has come to the attention of the Presidium and myself that an increasing number of senators are absent from the chamber when their business is listed in the order paper. So these are leaders who choose not to appear for the sittings even when they have a matter before the House that they need to prosecute.
Where are they?
They just choose not to. They have other things to deal with.
No, but your job is senator. You're supposed to be in the chambers discussing a paper or discussing business or oversighting business. That's your job.
Pretty much, senators oversighting, ensuring that counties do work, counties do get the allocations that they need, ensuring that the developments being done by governors and whatnot are up to par.
And if you're not going to be there, surely the House Speaker would know.
Yeah.
And you would have excused yourself, because that's what, according to standing orders, you're supposed to actually excuse yourself for emergency.
Yeah.
Because like a bus driver saying, "Well, I'm not going to drive." What are you doing? What are you doing?
So here they're taking advantage of the fact that I, as a senator, choose not to be there, but I can request you to prosecute my matter on the floor of the House, which goes to beat the system that requires you to be there for 8 consecutive sittings. So,
So if this is your job and this is what you're elected to do, and this is the path you've chosen, what exactly are we seeing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are we seeing?
What are we doing?
One can never fully comprehend the magnitude and the diversity that is represented by impunity. They know they can get away with it.
Yeah.
So they do it. But then what else does it spread to? Because what is certain is that the interests of those who elected them will not be managed in the manner that it should.
True.
Yes.
True. And I think even as the Speaker himself admits that this is going on in the House, it is not enough to just issue all these and say, now you need to write it to me and whatnot. I think it's about time that people are just censored and you lose your seat.
I mean,
because it is so clear under the law.
What are you doing? Yeah, I keep asking that question. If you're not doing what you've been elected to do, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You're doing what you are not elected to do.
Yeah.
Literally.
Just staying away. Yeah. City, what do you have?
This is interesting. Let's look at this multi-billion projects on page 4 and 5 of the Star. There's a story, though, that I read that I found very disturbing in the Star. Very disturbing. It's about a young girl, understand it, who actually left the home in Trans Nzoia, went to Kirinyaga County to get a job, was killed. She was found in a soak pit, dead. The subject of Kenyans killing other Kenyans, with the focus being on Kenyans killing women, Kenyan women. It is not possible for us to overstate this matter. It is also not possible for us to speak about it to the point where we can draw a conclusion. You stop talking about it when it has come to an end.
Yep.
So long as every other date is reported in the papers, there is something wrong.
There is something.
There is now a man who shot somebody who, according to the reports, was his friend 7 times.
7 times.
Hey!
Over a game of pool.
7 times. What on earth is that? Anyway, Stalled multi-million projects. No value for public cash as multi-billion projects stagnate. An analysis of the project implementation status by the State Department of Lands and Physical Planning revealed general delays in project implementation. Okay? Instant analysis. The high number of stalled projects is not only putting public money at risk, but also denying citizens much needed development. It is prudent for the government to prioritize the projects and clear them for the citizens to get the value for their money. The government could consider freezing new projects and seeking financing to complete existing projects. Why do I pick on this story? When projects began, there's an entire process that takes place before they are even kicked off. But the thing that makes it possible is budgets and the allocation of money to begin the projects. Meaning, the monies that we refer to as the budgeted amounts are monies that have been seen to be fitting to start and also finish the project.
Yes.
Unless they're going to say specifically, it's just to start the project. But if you can't finish it, then why are you starting it?
Yeah.
Why bother?
Yes. No, if you can't finish it, the whole purpose of starting it is so that you can finish it. If it's in phases, then we need to understand which phase is being funded. So, if it is funded and it is incomplete, so what are we saying? The money that was funded or the money was set aside for funding the project, what happened to it? Did we spend all of it and after spending realize that it was insufficient to have the project completed? Or are we saying that the money was budgeted for the project, it was adequate, but somehow whatever was utilized couldn't finish the project? Why are we even discussing stalled projects in the first place?
I'm telling you.
Because a stalled project means money has been spent on it. And if it isn't completed, again, it means that money has gone to waste completely.
And there are no projects that are started in the Republic of Kenya that do not have adequate budgets.
You wouldn't start it otherwise.
Nowhere.
Yep.
Nowhere.
Yep.
So what are we talking about? Let me talk about this goons on the loose story. Okay. And just before we do that, we're talking about, we're having this conversation at 8 o'clock today when we talk about human rights and actually what has happened to them. And I'm going to take this opportunity to say his name. Brian Odhiambo has now been missing for 2 months and 7 days. His wife, Alvia Oko, does not know where he is. He disappeared on the morning of the 18th of January in the Lake Nakuru National Park. It is said that he had been taken and beaten by KWS officers. It is alleged. This is what some witnesses saw. But to date, he has not returned home. Neither has his body been presented anywhere, if indeed he is dead. Alvi doesn't know where her husband is. Neither do Kenyans. Today, we say his name, Brian Odhiambo. Justice for Brian. He needs to be found, or at least those who took him need to tell us why. He represents many a Kenyan. He represents many people who have disappeared, who have been killed for no apparent reason. And those reasons need to be made apparent. Goons on the loose, how violent mobs are targeting state critics. And it's a growing concern over a coordinated wave of attacks against government critics, raising alarm about increasing political interference. Now, the violence characterized by orchestrated assaults and intimidation has drawn widespread condemnation and exposed deepening fault lines in the nation's politics. Defying the very essence of law and order, a disturbing trend of violence has taken root in recent months, with politicians and public figures who dare to criticize the government becoming prime targets. You open your mouth today in a way that's not palatable for many to hear, we don't see you tomorrow. The culprits, goons, some clad in attire that imitates military gear, act without fear, while the police stand by, their silence louder than sirens. Even with video evidence capturing these attacks, justice remains elusive, as prosecution of attackers seems a privilege rather than a rule. Government critics argue that these attacks signal a shrinking democratic space in Kenya, with dissenting voices increasingly threatened. The most recent incident occurred on Sunday at Nyayo National Stadium, where Mumias East MP Peter Salasia was attacked by a group of youth during a football match between Kenya and Gabon. And he says that when he was coming into the stadium, he was told, "Hey,
he was warned,
you guys, they're coming. These guys are coming for you today." And it's just marked the number of things that we've seen happening before. And if you look at a calendar of events, look at the spate of attacks. That in October 2024, Governor George Natembeya confronted assailants outside Wafula Chebukati's home when he went to visit him in his illness. November 28th of the same year, Rigathi Gachagua attacked at Kiambu funeral. Vehicle damaged, supporters injured. December 28th, tear gas canisters thrown near Gachagua's platform in Yandarua prayer meeting. January 25th, Maina Njenga disrupts Dorcas Gachagua's prayer session at Kamkunji Stadium in Nyeri. And then, of course, on the 23rd of March, Peter Salasya attacked by youth at the Nyeri National Stadium football match. So is this a thing that they will be organized? If you say something politically, or if you take a particular stand over something, if you critique, if you open your mouth, the possibility of then you being attacked, whether in a public or private space, then becomes much higher. Is that what we're hurtling into? Is that where we are going? That people can be for hire? And it's not even a hidden thing anymore, that people know these guys, they've been given 1,000 bob, they've come together in a mob, they're going to take you out.
You see, the thing is, we live in a country where everyone has a right to speak. And I don't have to agree with you in everything. You know, I don't have to agree with you for you to consider that respectful. Dissent is allowed. And people should be allowed to just speak their minds and take a stand. And when that is seen as though it means disrespect, then we have a problem, because we don't understand what our rights are. And this goes to Kenyans out there. I mean, if I dissent with the person that you support, does not mean that it is disrespectful to them. I just don't agree with the position they are taking.
You know, this was a growth industry once in our politics. It hasn't fully died out, but from what we are reading, there seems to be a resurgence. It's like it's becoming alive now. Goons cannot flourish if they're not being paid.
Nope.
So the question is, why have some individuals seen it fit to revive the goon squad industry? Why? Because it's being revived as we watch. And this issue of anyone who opposes the views of the government or people who support the government, and that you are singled out for a sound beating. Again, it reminds me of politics of many, many years gone by, even the previous century.
Or if you say something that somebody doesn't accept,
you would definitely be injured.
You would. You would.
There are cases where the individuals, if you oppose them, it was known, death may not be far away. So it has revived. Why? Who's reviving it? Again, these questions, no matter how many times we ask them, come back to the police service. Director General, Kanja, why are we seeing a resurgence of goon activity?
And you see, as we talk about this goon activity, remember what happened during presidential events, even on Sunday. It was at a presidential event because the president was there, security was heightened. And even Salasya, if you looked at that clip, was being beat up in front of a police officer.
Right.
Not one, but several police officers who just watched him being harassed by people, which begs the question, then what is the role of the police if not to maintain law and order? Let me give you a story. On Saturday, I've been having an issue with a club that is next to where I live.
You've been having a problem with your neighbor?
With my neighbor, yes. So I go to a police station to report the matter, because then again, they're the ones to ensure that law and order is maintained, right? So I get in, and the police officer on the desk says, "So how do we record this?"
What do you mean?
Yeah, because apparently it is not in their purview. That is a job that is meant for NEMA. So I asked them, but are you not the ones who are supposed to maintain law and order and whatever? I even quoted the law where it says, my rights have been infringed upon. And they actually dismissed me. I called the OCS only for the OCS to then again speak to the officers and ask them, why are you not recording a legitimate complaint that has come to you, which goes to show you that whoever owns this club clearly
has put something down there at the table to say, if anybody comes to make noise, just shut it down. That's some of the stuff that we're looking at, isn't it? Fun stuff. Fun, crazy.
You know, it is never clear until it is clear what it is that the power of influence and example can bring about. We have a leadership class that seems to think that the law is a suggestion when it doesn't suit them.
Yes.
Now, this is the manifestation at the level where the Mwananchi now resides. The problem is simple. Everybody decides to take the law in their own hands, and they decide what the law means to them.
So let's all do,
Yes. You tell me how it is that on a presidential tour of Nairobi, you can, at the same time, not 10 days after, you can actually find individuals robbing other Kenyans, disturbing them
4 days
in
consecutively.
broad daylight, and you're telling us that nothing. I know.
You're telling us that is normal, as that's in fact that's just crowd. What do you say? That's crowd behavior.
No, that's not crowd behavior.
Sorry,
it's not.
No, sorry.
Hooliganism.
Horror. No.
Being
horrible.
baptized as crowd behavior.
No way.
Huh?
In the boss, did you see some of those pictures? There was a guy who basically was trying to remove the door of a vehicle from its hinges, and behind him was a police pickup. Behind him, people's bags were being taken. Somebody gets on a motorcycle.
Motorbike.
They take off right there. And that's what I was telling you guys. If it had happened on the first day, somebody would have said, okay, fine, crowd behavior, a crowd has come, these pickpocketers cannot control themselves, it's just fantastic. Day 2, day 3, then they did the mother of all on day 4. Come on.
There is someone I was speaking to from someone who does some job around Mathare, and he was telling me that the precedent has been set by those in leadership. You loot from us, we copy from you. It's exactly what City is saying.
Man, you put it so
what
well.
it is they do is a reflection on the ground, because no one cares. You're looting us, we will equally loot, especially at your event.
Oh my God.
Let me take 2 minutes and just point out to you some of the things that were brought out for the no value for public cash as multi-billion projects. I'll read 3. Kenya Affordable Housing Finance and Registration of Community Land Use, Isiolo South. Expenditure the first financial year. That one. Doubtful. The georeferencing land parcels project recorded a completion rate of 19%. State Department of Livestock Development Nyakango. This is by the control of budget, valued at 31 billion, whose completion is also problematic. 10 projects, 4 already behind schedule. Livestock training in Mogotio, yet to start. Okay? Now, the State Department of Higher Education, 10 projects valued at 11.9 billion, whose completion is doubtful. This list goes on and on and on and on. When you're told that the value was 10 billion, it means that was the budget.
Yeah.
The money was set. Budget means the money is set what?
God.
Aside. This list, it's a double-page story.
Yeah.
So when you have a double-page story, and the truth is, they continue. It's example after example after example after example after example.
Hey, Jesus Christ, son of a carpenter. What is it? That 19%, that first one that you read about 19%. Tell me where? Will you go and finish something and then you score 19% and the person says, well done, come back tomorrow, let's continue.
And by the way, this thing began in the tenure of Uhuru Kenyatta, 2013.
2013.
We're now in 2025, 12 years down the line.
Come on.
19%.
19%.
And you'll find this thing has been budgeted. It has been
Money has been paid.
It has been supplementary budgeted for, and we're still at 19.
What?
Case in point, the Ronald Ngala Institute in Mombasa.
Is it Kilifi or Mombasa?
I think somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
in the coast.
Yes.
It has gobbled billions and billions and still not completed.
Me, the one which takes my car, the one which has always made me happy. Yaror Kimorer. That thing sets standards. You look at the picture.
Yeah.
It's as God made it.
Yeah.
In fact, one of these days, I'll do a documentary on that Aurora.
Yeah?
Wallahi.
We don't talk about it. as God made it. You know, even just
as God made it, that is
tracks
where it is.
of kokoto, sand.
Something. Nah.
But there is a foundation stone, no?
Aki, it's not fun.
Which one?
See, the one that was put there by the
When they go and cut
to launch,
ribbon.
Foundation stone.
Beg you, Joe. As God?
But see, full stop.
As God what?
Made it.
Made it.
Let me do the list that is here. If you read this list, you'll get an immediate headache.
Headache. And I don't have Panadol, so we ain't doing that right now. In the
No,
meantime, it's 7 a.m.
Spice up your life.
Good morning, this is the News Wire. I'm Leah Ubaga. Inspector General of Police Douglas Kanja has maintained that his detectives will conduct an impartial probe into the fatal shooting of 35-year-old Amos Langat, who was allegedly shot by an officer attached to State House. Witnesses say Muhammad Yusuf shot Langat 7 times at around 8 p.m. on Sunday after disagreeing over a game of pool, something that Muhammad has completely refused.
Nikaona watu wametoka mbio ndani kwa pool. Kidogo kidogo nikasikia jamaa ni kama amenyang'anya askari bunduki. Baada ya hapo bunduki, wakati askari alirudishiwa, maneno ikakuwa imeisha. Kidogo bado ule jamaa akaenda akarudi, akafuata ule karao na maneno. Ndio huyo karao alijam, akapiga risasi 2 juu. Watu wakakimbia. Baada ya kukimbia, ule jamaa alichukua mawe. Sasa ndio ule karao alichukua advantage kumpiga, na hiyo ni mbaya, ambapo huyo jamaa sio mwizi.
Ule mzee kitambo afike pale chini, ndugu yake aliomba msamaha. Kweli kabisa, msamehe.
And Lagat's family has demanded for justice for their loved one.
Langat anaishi hapa karibu na kwa Mungai. Haishi mbali, yeye ni mwenyeji hapa. Sasa tunalilia haki. Ijulikane, kazi ya askari walinde raia, sio kuua raia.
Alikuwa mtegemeo kwangu na familia yetu huko nyumbani. Hata hiyo time kabla hatujaachana na yeye, alikuwa anapanga mambo na nyumbani huko. Kuna kazi alikuwa anaendeleza huko nyumbani. So tunaomba serikali atusaidie kabisa juu sisi ni wanyonge.
And the Nelson Makanda-led panel will today assess another group of candidates, including Erastus Edung, Francis Kakai, former Nairobi County Assembly Clerk Jacob Ngwele, and Kenya Power Board Chair Joyce Brenda Masinde. The final round of interviews set for tomorrow will see Lillian Wenjiku, Robert Assemble, and Saul Simiyu face the selection panel. In yesterday's interview, Abdul Kadir Lorot was fast and was followed by Anna Madi, who admitted that IEBC is an institution that has a lot of political interference, but that those who serve must realize the importance of involving the public in its affairs.
The IEBC is supposed to be an impartial arbiter that carries out its responsibility without any influence from anywhere, without influence from the government, from any political party, from any candidate, from any public office. And it is indeed true that stakeholder engagement is very, very important. It's very important. In fact, there is no institution that can run without engaging stakeholders, because we cannot work in silos. We have to work with partners. In engaging with stakeholders, first of all, you have to map them out and know who are the people that I need to work with.
Father Monya Chai maintained that he'll change the perception of Kenyans about IEBC.
So what would I like to be remembered? I would like to be remembered, and you can't do this alone. It can only be part of a team. I would like to be remembered as part of a team, and if I was given the opportunity to serve as chair, I would like to be remembered as the chair who was able to completely reduce the gap of the trust deficit between the people of Kenya and the electoral management body in election issues. That's how I'd like to be remembered.
Another 105 candidates targeting to fill the 6 IEBC commissioner positions will be interviewed from March 26th to April 24th. Throughout the vetting process, candidates will be evaluated based on their experience, integrity and strategic vision for strengthening Kenya's electoral framework. And in the international scene, President Donald Trump said Monday he would levy a 25% tariff across the board on any country buying oil or gas from Venezuela as he wages a deportation campaign against Venezuelans and slaps duties on a number of trading partners since returning to the White House in January. Trump has unleashed tariffs on U.S. allies and foes alike, attempting to strong-arm both economic and diplomatic policy via the financial mechanism. That's the news wire. I'm Leah Obaga.
SpiceFM, Nakuru.
All right, so a few minutes after 7 o'clock, a quick look at what it looks like with traffic this morning. And still, I don't think we're going to have too much of a problem. A bit of a sprinkle this morning, but then there's the Thika Superhighway. It's like magic, man. 1 minute, nothing. The next, it's jam-packed. And traffic is coming in all the way from Garden City out towards the Pangani Underpass. So that is already bumper to bumper. And then what came off of the Northern Bypass has now spilled over towards Kiambu Road. Very, very busy. It's also busy coming off of Wayaki Way now. And Naivasha Road that gets onto Ngong Road, very busy as well. Bumper to bumper in some parts coming off of Langata Road through towards Uhuru Highway. So that is busy right now. And there it is, the Eastern Bypass all the way from Ruai through towards the Cabanas Interchange. Very, very slow all of a sudden. So traffic has hit you in the mouth and kicked you in the teeth already. We're just going to keep an eye on things and try to keep it moving as much as we can. We'll talk in the meantime on SpiceFM, KE on X, hashtag The Situation Room.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
All right, it's 7 after 7 and 7 seconds after 7 minutes after 7. How about that? 7:07:07. And that's where we are this morning. A very good morning to you. And coming into the second hour of Kenya's biggest conversation this morning. Great to have you here on this Tuesday. And as we do, a number of conversations will we have. But you've woken up this morning and you've brushed your teeth. And then you've sunk your teeth into your favorite hot coffee. Or you've decided that you're going to have an iced pastry for breakfast. And you're thinking, I'm doing this and I have no tooth sensitivity, and I'm telling you, absolutely. Why? Because you've decided to listen to what we've been saying and that you don't have to have tooth sensitivity anymore because you use Sensodyne. And you don't have to worry because you have the ultimate relief from tooth sensitivity. And how do we know this? Well, because Sensodyne is the #1 recommended brand by dentists, and we say that a happy mouth is a happy mind. So Sensodyne for tooth sensitivity, relief, and everyday oral health. Cindy? Absolutely? Okay. Thanks. I like it when you absolutely me.
Absolutely. You?
So now that we have our teeth in order, so when you go to school and you're looking for something to do after getting onto a platform, there seems to be one that's giving you all that you need, Dennis.
Yes. And when we talk about matters to do with school, we're talking about a young Kenyan high school graduate, who wants to join one of the top universities abroad. And through that, we want to link you up with a platform that will make sure that you get into these universities. Now, Alex Pathway is here for you to ensure that you make that dream a reality. Alex says, you're done with your high school in Kenya, wants to go abroad, we will get you there through Alex. And Alex says you will gain globally recognized skills, access an extensive network of global universities, and receive expert mentorship and career guidance. CT, you look at me as though this is something close to your heart because Mwalimu Nini, the past.
No, very true indeed.
Yeah.
I have encountered Alex.
Yes.
And the things they speak of are things which are true. they do offer some amazing courses.
Yes.
And they do offer an opportunity that is flexible and one that anyone who is keen can actually apply themselves to. And it does produce the results that they speak of.
Yes.
And they do introduce to some of the best universities on the planet.
Yes.
All the things they're saying are actually true. Yes, they're true.
And you see, if you want to get there, they're telling you that we will give you scholarships and sponsored placements. So they're even helping you financially, making sure that you get that. And for you to be part of that, you go to www.lexafrica.com/join-pathway to explore your global university network. LX, Kenyans abroad, check.
There you go. And always something to do when it comes to options for you. And so we'll be looking into more of that later. Even as we do, we're getting into our conversation for this hour. And our guest is already seated. Wakili Willis Otieno is here with us this morning. Good morning, Wakili.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm all right.
Yes.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana. Glad to be here with the city. It's long since I saw him. The man, the sage with wisdom.
Oh, wow. Do we need to give you guys a minute? Oh, it gladdens my heart that two friends can connect. That's great. Thank you for being here, Wakili. Good to have you here. And a number of things are going on. IEB selection panel started yesterday, trying to look for the position of the chairperson and then seeing what happens after that. We're going to be talking about that, restructuring the IEBC and what could actually come about to have meaningful, efficient elections in Kenya. But before we do that, let's welcome you to today's show with today's proverb. CT will tell you where he's gone this week, and then you can do us the good favor of interpreting that for us. You know the law is clear.
It's always clear.
We are in the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. Rich history. 11th, 12th century. The remnants of that particular civilization still exist, even as we speak. It was part of the trade caravan route that was a very fundamental feature in the kingdom that existed in that region for a long time. The thing about this country is this. Close to 90% of the country is the Sahara Desert. So, and yet it's actually a very rich country. It has huge oil deposits. It has, I mentioned the deposits of oil and other minerals for a simple reason. Despite the mineral resources it has, it's still one of the poorest countries on the continent and on earth. This is the terrible and painful legacy of the African continent. A wealthy continent with some of the poorest people on earth. Poor in that the governments they choose and the governments that take power never seem to prioritize the citizenry. So the citizenry, despite the natural resources that the countries have, still linger in abject and staggering poverty. The proverb, if you watch your pot, your food will not burn. Now, pot here refers to a vessel that you use for cooking. Nothing to do with your belly. It is, yes, sufria. Okay? If you watch your pot, your food will not burn.
Wakili?
It's simply, in my view, my interpretation is that this proverb is telling us that you must always pay attention to that which you are doing. You pay attention, you're able to get the best results out of it.
Absolutely.
Because you have your mind in it. This is pretty straightforward today. Thank you, Sweetie. Just give me a hand.
Wakili seems to be saying that you gave him a pass.
This was not a pass. This was 110 out of 100.
So folks who may not be having an easy time or will not be given a pass are those who are being interviewed by the IEBC selection panel that started yesterday. We saw a number of people then being interviewed, questioned, back and forth. And that brings into the conversation that we're having about restructuring the IEBC. It's been a long time coming. It's been 2 years since there's been a fully fledged, and when we're talking about fully fledged, we're talking about personnel without a chairperson and without commissioners. But we know that the office of the IEBC is still in existence and it is functioning for all intents and purposes. But certain things are not done because we are told there are no commissioners who then have the responsibility to activate certain of these activities. So that started yesterday. But the question has always been that with an IEBC, how then are we able to deal with transparency and fairness? That the IEBC seems to have been the battleground for elections and not just, a commission that was overseeing an election. How can we start to look at this commission now as one that is transparent and fair if we continuously have political parties involved in what it does? Let's start from that point.
The unfortunate thing about our IEBC is that we've arrogated upon it responsibilities that are beyond what it should do. And the politicians, the legacy politicians, seems to have taken a position that whoever controls IEBC controls Bomas and will get his way in the elections. If I look at my experience in electoral processes, I'll tell you that for us to achieve free and fair elections, the first thing we need to pull down is Bomas. We don't need a national tallying center. When I went to court in 2015 on the minor KI case, I was actually litigating Article 138(12) of the Constitution, which requires that presidential elections should be done at the constituency level. And the Court of Appeal and the High Court agreed with that position. But somewhere along the way, the implementation of that judgment has only been partially implemented. They only focus on that polling station results are final, and then you transmit them to Nairobi. The spirit of that decision was that you vote at your polling station, you count and announce at the polling station. Then you do the first tallying at your constituency tallying center. So presidential elections should be held by constituency returning officers, not the national returning officer. In fact, this position of a national returning officer, like Chebukati used to call himself, is an anathema to our laws. We don't know about it.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. His role was simply to make the declaration of the final results. So if you are to conduct elections in every constituency, remember, every polling station reports together with these ballot boxes and papers to the constituency returning officer. So that if there be any dispute, the boxes are there, the ballots are there. As you're doing the tallying, if I'm disputing one polling station, we can open the boxes and do recounts.
Why is there such a problem with Bomas?
The problem
because are we saying that by the time people leave the CTC and find their way to Bomas, something happens in between there? Is that what we are saying?
Of course, what happens is that whatever the people have decided at the polling stations, when transmitted to Bomas, and they're transmitted in thousands, it becomes something else. Kenyans have never done an interrogation of what transpired with what was called the Book 2 of 2. Why did Chebukati decide to print 2 results declaration forms 34As? Two sets. One he was calling Book 1, one he was calling Book 2.
Book 2.
How many books are we supposed to have?
One. Because they learned from 2017 a petition which again I participated in, and I was the one overseeing the scrutiny exercise of the forms, is that when the original form was brought to be scrutinized, we were able to
verify Form 34.
We were verifying 34As and 34Bs. Yeah.
Yes.
We were able to flesh out fake forms. Because they had used fake forms to declare the results. What had happened to the original? The original was discarded somewhere, and a fake one was used to make the declaration of the results. So to cure and to protect himself from that theft which he had done, they came up with now 2 sets of originals. So that if they discarded the first set, they still have an original. If you go scrutiny, you will still find an original form.
But Kelly, we're talking about these things like, oh, Dennis went to town and he bought an apple and then he came back. It's like, it's just normal behavior. It's not. We're talking about an election here, where essentially we're talking about, sacred documents, really, when it comes to an election process that should be handled in a manner that, spews integrity, spews transparency, spews fairness and justice. But it just seems as though, things are taken back and forth, and we're just wondering, okay, so...
Ndui may be the only serious person on this subject. The full story of 2017, in my view, has not been told. If you look at the report of the registrar of the court that oversaw the scrutiny of the forms, somebody was declaring for you a president using a foolscap.
Surely.
Yeah. Those are the forms that some of them...
Something that somebody has
handwritten, a foolscap. Yeah. It was done in such a cavalier manner that you really wonder, is this really how you're arriving at a president? Because what happened was, the National Tallying Center, in my view, is established purely for purposes of manipulating the vote. So they were working backwards. We have the number of forms, the votes they want to declare. So just fill it in. So you don't have time to create a perfect form. So I believe somewhere when they're doing the math, I think two constituencies, it was declared using foolscaps.
What I find fascinating, since we're looking at this thing academically, it's very disturbing but fascinating, is this. If you listen, I have listened to the stories that emanated from 2007, the elections, and one hears similar stories where the results come in, and because the maths isn't adding up, somebody just says, no, cancel that one, write this. And it is then handwritten. Now, so it looks like the people who are involved in this didn't change much. We go to an election in 2017, one election, in fact, two elections, 2013, this is 2017, and they're doing the same thing.
Same thing.
So you ask yourself, what is it that makes people so courageous to believe that you can actually determine an election result by simply deciding this is what we're going to declare? Because that's what it amounts to.
The unfortunate bit is that all the legacy politicians, they like the system that way. Because they hope, each side hopes that it will benefit them at some point. But if you are genuine about conducting elections in this country, the first thing, as I said before, do away the bombers. Take the elections to the polling stations and the constituencies.
Right.
Then we follow the results constituency by constituency. So that if anybody is disputing, you are disputing a constituency return, and everybody becomes a tallying officer in their own norms. If the media is declaring for me in Mvita, these are the results for the candidates, and I'm doing my tallying. They will move now to Nyeri town, they're ready, we are noting down. So that by the time the threshold is reached, everybody knows. So the work of the chairman, he should be sitting in a boardroom, not spending 2 billion shillings hosting us on national circus.
Now that is my problem. And even now, as we're talking about restructuring the IEBC, the IEBC as a commission, if you ask me, does their job. But the problem here is that there is too much interference, and the interference comes largely from political parties and their people.
I will not say political parties. I'll actually say it's more
individuals.
The state. It's the state. Parties have... I've been to Bomas now, I think, in 2 elections. I've been an active participant at Bomas, just witnessing what is going on there. And I ask myself, what are we all doing here?
Why is everybody at Bomas?
It is reduced to a context where you're looking at figures without forms. Where are the forms? Where are the ballots? Where is the primacy of the people's will? It's at the constituency level. Not a single ballot paper finds itself at Bomas.
Who tells people to go to Bomas? Does IEBC say let us all convene at Bomas?
Yes, IEBC and the commissioners in particular, once they decide to gazette the Bomas as the tallying center, the next thing they normally do is they tell the media, don't declare any results unless we release them to you.
Okay,
and
then I must ask,
they've managed to bully everybody.
So then I must ask, what is the purpose of having a national tallying center if everything has already been tallied at the constituency level? What's the purpose of having an NTC?
Do we need anything at the national level?
Yeah.
In my view, we do not need it. Because if you go by the spirit of the minor care case, factual determination by the minor care case, Presidential elections are done at the constituency. What we need are constituency tallying centers. And what must be present at the constituency tallying centers? Number one are the forms, 34As. Number two are the ballots supporting that form. Number three, we have the agents and we have the observers. And the agents are coming from each polling station. And they jointly hand over the results together with the IEBC officials to the constituency turning officer. So that if there is any mischief, the agent who was in the polling station is able to say, no, what you are getting in the form is different from what we have in the box. Open the box. Everybody is there. Now, when you create the National Tallying Center, you kill that process because now you are giving us numbers, you are giving us figures without supporting documentation.
Okay.
Now,
sorry. It is now mathematics, right? Because we're trying to get to the place where we see transparency and fairness here. Those numbers that you now have at the constituency tallying center, you've got agents, you've got IEBC officials, you've got observers, essentially everybody that participated in the process and signed their documentation is actually present there.
Yes.
Now, what people have been asked is that the returning officer of each constituency tallying center takes that documentation and somehow finds their way by train, bus, air, land, and sea to Bomas.
Yes.
Now, whatever happens on the way has now been the bone of contention, all this. The channels for this transmission has been the problem, is it not?
No. Nduka, can I pause?
Yes, please.
We are at the constituency level.
Yes.
Okay. They are supposed to transmit results to where exactly?
To the National Tallying Center.
Yeah, so if there was no National Tallying Center, what then would we do with the results?
Now, for me, my proposal is those constituencies should be transmitted primarily to the constituency tallying center. That's the electronic version.
Yes.
Because immediately they've done the transmission, they follow up with the physical delivery.
That's where the forms come in.
Yes. That's when the forms come in.
Yeah.
The forms are coming with supporting ballots.
That's why we're all watching the TV at that point, and then we're saying it has gone to 2,000 like that.
That constituency, having received its results, that constituency, in my view, that constituency should proceed to declare and tell us these are our provisional results of the elections.
Because after all the individuals have signed off and have
yes, and they're present.
Yeah.
Then we write, okay, for the constituency Bobasi, these are the numbers for each candidate. We close that chapter. We go to another constituency until the point when the threshold is met by a candidate. And anybody can now do the tallying in their own homes. So I can be sitting here with the city and Bobasi declares, we write on a foolscap. Somebody else declares, we write. Then we are able to tell at the end of it what are the votes for each of the candidates. You know, look at the American elections. You don't know who is the chairman of the election management body.
No,
you don't.
You don't.
And the elections are declared on a state
basis.
And you're able to tell, in fact, the president-elect in that country makes his acceptance speech and the loser concedes the elections before the election management body sits to formally declare who is the winner. Because the elections are held on November 20th. The EMB sits around December 4th. By that time, we have a president-elect.
And it's known.
It's accepted. Why? Because every state is able to come and declare, these are our results. So let's even superimpose that and use our constituencies as the equivalent of the states, parts of the elections. Let every constituency declare the results. And we are able to do the math. And if I have a dispute, for example, in the last election, why was I filing an election petition for the whole country? If there's a dispute, it's narrowed down to a particular constituency. Raila Odinga, for example, had no problem with the votes cast in Kisumu town constituency, West constituency. He had a problem with specific constituencies. But now, when he files a generic petition, he's even challenging those votes that are not disputed. The votes cast for him in Kisumu town central was not in doubt.
Was not in dispute.
It was not in dispute. So you should only file a dispute that, let's say, our problem is Tharaka Nithi. So that even if you resolve that dispute and to order for fresh elections, you see, it is narrowed to a particular locality. You are able to tell and you spare the country the ignominy of doing a repeat elections for everybody.
So, Willis, with all this that is glaring to be a no-brainer on what should be done, I mean, declaring the results at the constituency, it seems as though there is every intentional decision not to do that. Which one would ask? Why?
As I said, it's intentional because there's a group that wants to control that process. And there are people within the state, obviously, probably the intelligence services, political parties, who believe that we need to have a say and a control on the actual outcome of the elections. Hence the bombers. Because at bombers, you end up arguing over forms and figures without any supporting document. And even when we went to Supreme Court, I remember in the Supreme Court, one of the arguments we had raised was that let us be given all the Form 34As, Book A and Book B. And the court gave the order. The next day, the court reversed its order saying it's administratively impossible to get all the Form 34As. And then I said, okay, we'll take it for the disputed polling stations. And they brought. And almost 70% of the Book 2s had been used. And the Book A's, book 1, could not be traced.
Okay. Would you put any kind of blame when we talk about the loss of accountability, even as we go to a break, loss of accountability of loss of fairness and transparency at the doorstep of the IEBC previously? And if so, what will we be looking at? Because now we're in a process to bring in essentially a new top level IEBC, and we say top level because of commissioners and chairperson. So if the blame was at the IEBC before, what can be done? Or would we say that, now that can actually be cleansed?
In fact, for me, the simplest thing that IEBC should do is take away this responsibility from themselves. Don't hoard this responsibility at the national level. Send it back to where it belongs, to the constituencies. And let the constituent returning officers conduct presidential elections, as we will watch like everybody else. If there's a dispute, we'll come in and make the declaration at the constituency level. But do we have men and women of valor who are willing to cede power? Because to them also they become most relevant at the time. It's their time to load onto Kenyans that we are now your big boys. We are your masters. You must watch every 2 hours for us to come and read for you 2 constituencies, and you wait.
And wait and see what would happen. Yeah. These are the questions that we're asking this morning. Wakili Willis Otieno is here with us today, and we know that the IEBC selection panel is sitting. It'll do so for the next 3 days to be able to select a chairperson. The commissioners and their roles will come in thereafter. And what we've been told is that, in the next couple of months, we should then have a complete IEBC in place who will then be able to start to do the very, very pertinent work towards a next election that happens in just under 2 years. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. We'll come back with this conversation and see, all right, so what does it really mean then for justice and fairness and transparency in terms of the IEBC and what it does for elections and boundaries in this country? It is Kenya's biggest conversation, The Situation Room, 28 minutes to 8 o'clock. These conversations continue right after this break.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day. The weather with SpiceFM.
The rain continues in Nairobi, 16 degrees. We'll see highs of 25, and it's cloudy at 13 into Nakuru with highs of 25. 24 will be the high in a rainy Nyeri at 16, while it's sunny at 13 in some parts of Eldoret, going to highs of 26. A sunny morning in Mombasa at 27, and it's sunny as well in Malindi at 28. Partly sunny conditions at 20 in Kisumu, while at 17 it is sunny in Kakamega. 19 and sunny into Kampala, while in Dar es Salaam at 26 we'll see highs of 32. We're looking into a sunny Johannesburg at 16 with highs of 25, while Mogadishu at 28 is sunny. It's sunny at 14 in Addis Ababa. It's a hazy morning in Lagos at 26, while it's partly cloudy at 24 in Kinshasa.
Spice FM. Spice up your life.
All right, this is when traffic hour starts to get just a little bit crazy, and looking at the roads, and they've already started to pick up with traffic that's heavy coming on the Eastern Bypass heading out towards Outer Ring and the Cabanas interchange. There is quite some traffic on Langata Road coming from Uhuru Gardens out towards the Nyaya Stadium, and that's busy as you get onto Uhuru Highway. It's busy also on Raila Odinga Way, getting through with traffic coming from Gong Road, and so that is very, very busy right now. Take a look at the Thika Superhighway, thick with traffic, a whole beehive of activity as you get towards Survey at some point. Kiambu Road is also busy trying to find its way around Muthaiga Square. And speaking of Muthaiga coming in then on Limuru Road, also busy this morning. So we've clicked into traffic hour. Let's see what happens as we try to keep things moving. Let's talk on SpiceFM KE on X hashtag The Situation Room.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
In search of a new IEBC, new chairperson is being vetted. Well, one of those who are being vetted will become the new chairperson of the IEBC. And then commissioners will come in too. It's always been contentious. Let's look at the last 20 years of elections in Kenya. The responsibility of announcing the results, and we take the presidential election. Rarely do people have trouble with the 1,000 and some other elections that take place. During an election in Kenya, during a general election, 1,060 something elections take place because we're looking at members of the county assembly, we're looking at members of parliament, we're looking at senators, we're looking at governors, and then we look at the MCAs, and then we look at the president. But we only seem to have an issue with the presidential election. Yes, we do know that petitions are taken before court, but they pale in comparison to the vigor and vim that we see that people come and make noise about the presidential election. Of course, we can understand because it's a big ticket position. And those who then would see that their person is in the seat then have something to gain. We don't doubt that. But what is it going to take to get away from this thing where every election is seeded in controversy, especially around the seat of the IEBC? We saw it with Sami Kivwitu in 2007. We saw it with Isaac Hassan. We saw it with Chebukati twice. Why?
But do we have a problem with the presidential election?
It seems to be the one that has the most contention. Look at everything that happened. What plunged Kenya into trouble in 2007 was not an MP in the middle of Rabat.
But I'm asking the question again. Do we have a problem with the presidential election?
Or do we have the process upon which the president is declared?
What is our problem really?
It's the results declaration. The polling itself has no problem. And in fact, part of the issues that we've raised in petitions that I've done, the 2017 and the 2022 petition, are just to buttress what Ndu was saying. You'll note, for example, in some constituencies, some counties, you take the total votes cast for governor and total votes cast for the women reps and the total votes cast for the senators. In a county, you see they all largely tally. Total votes cast.
Yeah, no problem, yeah?
Then the same county, you add the total votes cast for president,
and suddenly
there's discrepancies because now you're being told that in County X, you want to tell me that 300,000 people walked into a polling station, or 20,000 people walked into a polling station, and were given
six.
Only they were not given all. They were only given they only cast for president and left 20,000 people in a county because already in our electoral laws. In terms of once you walk into a polling station, you must be given all six.
All six. Yes.
And you must cast it, even if you do not desire to choose a candidate.
Write anything.
Even if you don't choose, you must cast it.
Yeah.
So that at the end of the process, when we'll be doing the counting, that vote will be marked as a spoiled vote.
Yes.
But the tally of the presidential must be the same as the tally for governor, the tally for senator, the tally for women rep. In that polling station, they must tally. So it's not feasible that in an election, like in 2017, it was ridiculous. You had almost over 500,000 people.
Only voting for president.
Just voting for president and walking out. It's not possible. That's what I'm telling you. The National Tallying Center.
Yeah, because we remember Supreme Court Judge now, Smokin Wanjala, asking that question in 2017 when he said, what happened to those other votes that did not vote for president? Where did they go? And that's why I'm saying there seems to only be a problem when it comes to the presidential part of all of this. And the question is why? Or are we saying the declaration? Because at the end of that court process in 2017, what was the ruling? The ruling was not that who won the election. The ruling was that the channel through which these things were transmitted has a fault. And that seems to have been the problem in 2007. It was the problem in 2012. It was the problem in 2017. It again is a problem in 2022. How?
And it remains a problem until the time when we decide as a country we are not going to have 7 people controlling our fate. Because our fate is determined at the ballot, at the polling station. And we are able to follow our polling station results to our constituency. And we can make our declaration. You can choose to call it provisional or whichever name you want to call it. But at that level, we should all know what the count is per constituency. And we can all do our math. Do you know how much the country spends at Bomas?
Ridiculous, man.
Just the entire technological aspect of these elections to set up Bomas. It's costing us almost not less than 7 billion.
What?
Yes. Setting up Bomas, that entire infrastructure of IT and all. In fact, 7 billion is a very conservative figure.
Breathe.
Yeah.
In and out.
You are setting up a very expensive
outfit
that you
so
don't
essentially
need.
For nothing.
For nothing. You don't need it. Because if the work has been done at the polling station and the constituencies, then why are you investing this heavy infrastructure on Otimofo, CG servers in France, CG everywhere?
Let me go on an example that you gave earlier to be able to ask a question. You talked about the American election, which we know is largely run by volunteers.
Yes.
And you don't, this election that took place in 2022, the volunteers that ran that election, very unlikely that they will be the volunteers who run the election then in 2026. It's you don't even know. But the thing is that you're looking at a system, essentially, that is, you go into the system, you do the thing, you get out. And that's why then you're able to count. Anybody can count, and you can declare a state. And that what is given to the media, across media, will tally. But here, sometimes we see that, okay, the numbers that we keep, that's what we do on election night, isn't it? That we keep going from channel to channel, and everybody's numbers are different.
Until it hangs.
Until now something happens, and then we're saying the number stops at, we just see 220,000, 220,000. It's not been moving for the last 6 hours, and we're saying, Krisha, it's over, we are dead, let's all go to Bomas, right?
Yes.
So what would it take, essentially, for you to have a system that is so sure, so watertight, that you know we put in 10,000, we're going to get out 10,000. And that an individual, Ndu, cannot go there and tinker with anything, call me Jose, cannot go there and tinker with anything, and then somebody will start asking questions about what happened. How can we get to that point whereby the IEBC is an overseer of the process to ensure will not be compromised, will not be somebody says, okay, they smiled at me in a certain way, will not have any. How can we get to that place?
Isn't that giving IEBC too much power?
Yes.
Which is what he said. They should just be an overseer.
Why should they oversee that process?
That's the point. You know, that's what I was saying, that IEBC has been arrogating unto itself power that it doesn't have. And by creating bombers and investing huge resources and even bullying media, because they've bullied media houses that don't declare any results. You have to come to bombers and we have to feed into our portal to get the results you are relaying. Such that when their system hangs, as it will hang anyway, because it must always hang.
Well, it has to hang. If it doesn't hang, it's not an election.
It's not an election, it must hang. When it hangs, the media, you are caught. You're also now hanging the whole country. And yet, at the point of hanging...
We're even accused that we have our own tallying center.
Do you know the interesting thing about elections in Kenya is this? Having participated in elections, do you know that by midnight of the election night, there is not a single polling station that has not announced its results for president by midnight of elections night?
Meaning we should know.
We should know if we are serious. Because if polling closes at 5 p.m., let's give or take 1 hour to rearrange the polling station for recount. For counting.
Or
and
to
doing the
allow
closing
those who are
procedures
already in the queue by 5.
By 5 to finish. But of late, in fact, with the current the regulations, that 600 per polling station.
Yeah.
So normally, by close of business, there are very few. We are done. So setting up, rearranging the room for count and doing the closing procedures, give them 1 hour. Then it means by 6, the counting starts. So let's say there were some delays, give them another 1 hour. 7.
Because you're not calculating anything, you're just counting 1, 2, 3.
And
like
remember, you are only counting in respect to a maximum 600 ballots. Because each polling station can't take more than 600. Now, there is no polling station that can count 600 ballots for more than 1 hour.
Even if we start now, we'll reach 600 by 8 o'clock. Yes.
So it means that by 9, the whole country, the question of president has been sorted.
Done and dusted.
Now, it is the mischief of how to process the declaration of who it is. It takes you 7 days. And you must get a choir from Tanzania to come and entertain.
Sing even when the ship is sinking.
Yes. Then you wait, the system is hanging. You wait for us to give provisional. We are trying to... It's all... Rubbish. But let me say this. If we wanted transparency in our elections, even to catch this national talent center, one thing we must do, as I said, we must go to constituencies. Then there's always this thing, now that we use the KIMS kits for identification of the voter. IBC, at the constituency level, should make declarations of the voter turnout every 2 hours. Because the information is right there. In fact, this information should, as it comes to the system, as the voters identified, we should be able to have a system where political parties or the candidates themselves are able to feed in. They can see.
But it's digitized, is it not?
It's digitized, I'm saying.
Your whatever.
Yes, so
in
everybody, the information is there. So I should be able to know at any given time how many people have voted in this polling station or in these elections. What's the number? Because if you witness the last elections, in some parts of the country, when IBC attempted to declare the voter turnout, to disclose the voter turnout as at 2 p.m., you are seeing a return of less than 30%. Then all of a sudden at 5, those areas were now declaring 65% voter turnout. It is impossible. Human psychology, people primarily, most voters turn out early in the morning.
In the morning.
Yes.
Yeah. Then there's a lull during the day, and then they pick up later,
just before.
Yes. And that number cannot be more than the ones that came in the morning. It's impossible. So that whatever you are told, if by 2 p.m. you are told that you've had 30% voter turnout, you don't expect the voter turnout in that area to be more than 40%.
So my question keeps being then, what's the role of the IEBC in this process here? Because, I mean, sure, we know that they are the ones who hire the agents. They are the ones who hire all of these, the worker bees in this whole system. Those are then, they're not volunteers because they get paid something. They get this done. They're hired maybe for 1 month kind of thing. Now, to ensure that those numbers that are at the constituency, because we're talking about moving forward here, and we're in a process where a new selection is coming in, right? A chairperson will be selected soon. Commissioners will come in, and we're going to get the ball rolling. And the hope would be that you will not have the kind of confusion and drama, or even in some cases, orchestrated drama that we've seen before, and that once an election result is given, that Kenyans will actually say, right, this is an this makes sense. We're accepting of this result, and we're not going to have the drama that we did. So what would be the role of the IEBC today to ensure that this process that you're talking about actually happens? Who would be the one to say, actually, you know what? We don't need an NTC at Bomas or whatever. We will take the result from the CTC, and that is what will be given to Kenyans. It's not rocket science to put the thing together. Who would be the one to then make that declaration?
So it will require leadership from the commissioners to understand what their role is and to cede to the people what the dictates of the Constitution are in terms of transparency and accountability. But I don't want Kenyans to leave it to the commissioners. for the first time, this one we have to force the commissioners to respect the constitution. Whoever is going to be, we must demand of him that we are not going to spend 12 billion shillings on an NTC when we can get our results on our own at the constituency tallying centers. So Kenyans need to make sure that whatever was decided in the minor KI case is actually applied in the coming presidential elections. If you cede power to IEBC, remember, as it is now, look at the list of people who have applied for this job. You are seeing already, just from the short list, people holding brief for politicians. Yeah. People holding brief for politicians.
What does that mean, Willis?
They are there to serve political interests, parties and political interests.
Folks who are sitting on the selection panel?
No. I'm talking of the candidates. You can already see some of their candidates are holding brief for politicians. I mean, let's be honest. You can't tell me that you are very active party apparatchik, serving a political party, partisan interest. Now, all of a sudden, you want to become the chairperson of the electoral management body. I mean, you are going to be partisan. I'll rather, from the outset, we say, let political parties nominate commissioners so that we know each of us are coming with our partisanship. And then on the table, we are able to harmonize and find consensus on how to run elections. As opposed to pretend that you are independent, and yet the last election, you are inactive, you are standing on a political platform, campaigning for a political party. That should be a disqualification in my view. And more so, when that political party is going to be a key player in the coming elections. So we must call this out at the outset.
But Willis, what I find interesting is this. Let's start even with the selection of the interviewing panel.
Selection panel, yes.
Let's just move a little notch higher and look at the role that political parties have played in determining who is in the electoral panel. So this entire process at that level is already infected by political interests.
Correct.
So now, and the politicians seem to insist. What puzzles me, and what I find interesting, they want to control this process from the very beginning. Why then do they complain?
Because they pretend that the commission is independent.
It's not independent.
It's not independent. The design of the commission is such that it will not be independent. If you asked me,
yes.
In fact, if you asked me, the best commission we should have is a commission that is nominated by political parties.
Yes.
From the outset, we know.
So we know.
We know that you are holding brief
for this party.
And then you sit in the room,
yes.
You harmonize your processes.
And it's okay. We understand why you're here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm holding brief for my party, so let's agree on what can work for all of us as we are competing political parties. And that, to an extent, is what made the 2002 elections, in my view, possible. The people got their will. The commissioners that we had, Kivitu, Kanu had nominated 11 of them. The opposition had 10. It was known as partisan commission. But now on the table, they must all try to find a middle ground that can deliver a fair and fair election. What was the success, for example, of 2002 elections? By the time Kivitu was standing up to declare the results, the whole country knew Kibaki had won.
Yeah.
Because as the constituencies were declaring, the media was relaying. We were all able to do our math, our tally. The next day after the elections, the newspapers all had Kibaki at the front. Because we did the elections at the constituency levels and the constituencies declared them. So the hand of the commission was tied. In fact, Kivitu didn't even have a national tallying center.
No, he didn't.
No, he didn't.
He was doing the tallying in his boardroom. And he said, I've seen the results, I will announce for you. You to sit on a boardroom chair and declare the president. Now there's Chebukati and Ilk, 12 billion.
So would it be
as if we've never done?
So Willis, would it be disingenuous to say that to have a national tallying center essentially is a way to corrupt the results of the vote?
That is the sole intent of the national tallying center.
Could we say it's the tool used to predetermine the result you want?
You want,
yes. So essentially, we are saying it's pre-rigged.
Yes.
So the rigging, the existence of what we have is the system pre-rigged to determine an election in the direction that whoever decides the direction they want can. And it can work for anyone.
Yes.
So if we can sit here, 4 of us, this morning and have that conversation, then wouldn't it be clear to everybody else? It wouldn't take you 3 minutes to figure out that there's a problem here. That if you're okay here, the whole country, how many polling stations do we have in the thousands?
40,000.
40,000.
290 constituencies.
290 constituencies, right? But somehow they're all able to do their job and do it well. Kenyans show up to vote, whether we like it or not. Those say, I'm not going to vote, whatever. But people show up to vote. By and large, they do. Those who've been, okay, fine. 2/3 of the registered are the ones who came to vote last election. Possibly you could get it to be more. But the election process itself usually goes on well. Smoothly. People come out, they vote, we finish the thing, people even sit in the lines, they chat, people bring chairs, people have drinks, whatever.
It's a very pleasant day, actually.
Isn't it? You're greeting people you never met before, you're doing the
and
business.
you're chit-chatting away with people as you come to vote, yes.
But then a few hours later, the thing blows up into some rubbish. So if you can figure it out, that between the constituency and the National Tallying Centre there's a problem, we can sit here and see that. And we want to say we want to fix elections in this country. We want to make sure that everything is okay. If you listened to some of the interviews yesterday, that's one of the things that they said. Make sure that the election is going to be, prim and proper and all of that. If we can see that that's the problem, it seems like a no-brainer to me. Then remove the problem.
Well, the problem in this case would be remove the NTC. And take the declarations of the constituency as the final results.
So why wouldn't you want to do that? Yes.
Have you witnessed the disconnect we Kenyans have? I know the Nigerians have it, but us, we have it.
Oh, no, let's not even go there, because, we can do some, some serious problems.
The truth is patent, it's obvious.
It's clear.
But we will always go around it. We will avoid it. We will not say it. It's how we respond to the truth. It's not as though we don't know. No. If we were talking in an earlier hour of people who are deemed to be critics of the government or people who have joined the government are now being harassed by goons, a resurgence of goon squads. So, what is it? The criticism has to do with things which we know should be done but are not done. It's not as though we make them up. And that's the response.
And City, as we speak right now, the IEBC that the individuals will form the commission will be in place. So as we move forward towards the 2027 elections, as Kenyans, as stakeholders in the elections, what should we demand, including the fact that we have the minor KI case that shows us what to do? What should we demand, because the elections are for the people of the Republic?
I think when it comes to the next election, and I draw inspirations from the June 25th occurrences, the Kenyan people must lay the roadmap for that elections themselves. This time, they should not leave it to politicians and IEBC to control that process. It must be an accepted national conversation on how we are going to conduct these elections, how we are going to make the declaration of results, and how it's going to be shared with us. If IEBC is going to deny media access, I believe this generation is going to use TikTok to declare that result. Because they'll be in the polling stations recording everything as it happens. You will see so many TikTok lives across the entire country, and everybody is going to do their tallying. So it is in the interest of the new commissioners to accept that we're in a new information age, and the games that they used to play before, they cannot play them going forward. And IBC must allow for transparent electoral processes, as was envisaged in our constitution and anchored in the minor KI case.
Wow. Can it happen? Do you think that we have men and women worth their stuff, worth their metal, to be able to stand up and take the position right now? I mean, just look at look from the folks that are being, interviewed right now. Is there someone there who would then be able to stand up and say, actually, you know what? These are the problems that we've seen, and it's even giving us problems until today, and this is what we are going to do, essentially, to weed out that problem. Can we?
I mean, what should do, the selection panel should do Kenyans and honors. I mean, the partisans, the ones who've been actively engaging in political party activities, they should kick them out. They don't need to even waste time shortlisting them. Then, look for a man or a woman of valor. I'm not sure who that is in the list so far, but maybe they have hidden talents. But get someone who's courageous enough to say, this is what needs to be done, and I will do it. I'm not sure that list so far I don't get enough confidence from the list that we have. But maybe, I've said, maybe there is, I'm waiting to be surprised. Maybe there is somebody within that list, because there are many people who applied.
Sure.
I'm sure there is somebody who may be convicted and say, on this one, I will do it for Kenyans. But the starting point in terms of confidence building for even Kenyans to believe you, you don't start from a point of, I was an ODM Damu. Now I want to become chairman. Now I want to be the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission chairman. Let's be serious. If you are ODM Damu, kakando. If you are UDA Damu, kakando. At least let's pretend. Let's look for that one who was not Damu. Because these ones who always say Kanu Damu, then ODM Damu, Nak Damu. Yeah. This Damu, when do they do transfusion? We have to cleanse it from the previous party you are Damu of before. So let's be clear. Get somebody who at least has not shown open partisanship. Or if you are choosing partisans, they should say, we are choosing this one as UDM Damu as chairman. Then for commissioners, this one was ODM Damu, this one was Wiper Damu, this one, bring them now as partisans from the beginning. But we all know these lists of commissioners are representing partisan political interests. Let them find accommodation. Let them find consensus once they are set up.
Willis Otieno, thank you. Stuff for us to think about and hope for, that we will actually see some changes when it comes about, because it's clear across the board there is no satisfaction with the way things have been handled. And going into another election in just under 2 years, necessary, just over 2 years now, and necessary for us to have those. And we want to thank you for sharing those insights with us this morning. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Ndu.
Willis Otieno Wakili has been our guest this hour, and we enter into more conversations. Good morning. 8 o'clock.
Spice up your life.
Good morning, this is the News Wire. I'm Lea Ubaga. The escalating situation in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo is a source of concern for neighboring countries, according to President William Ruto. Ruto, while addressing a joint East African community, that is Southern African Development Community Summit, which he co-chaired with Zimbabwe's Emmerson Mnangagwa, bringing together 15 heads of state and their representatives, said the ongoing war in DRC has the potential to spill over with serious consequences such as loss of lives, instability and displacement of people. At the same time, the summit adopted the report on the outcomes of an earlier meeting held on March 17th in Harare, Zimbabwe, directing the implementation of immediate, medium and long-term measures to attain sustainable peace and security in Eastern DRC. During the meeting, former President Uhuru Kenyatta, former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo and former South African President were appointed to the panel of facilitators. And Melen Mogaka, the woman seen in a video being drugged and forced to put sand in her ex-husband's grave, is expected to travel to Nyamira today to identify her abusers. Melen, who refused to put sand in the grave of her ex-husband, who died in a motorcycle accident, is alleged to have had 2 children with the deceased and that she had taken them to bury their father.
Kila mtu kumbe hii kitu ilikuwa imepangwa na sielewi. Vijana wamewekwa mpaka wa pikipiki wanasema nisitoroke na sikuwa naelewa ni nini. Mchanga walijaribu kuniwekea kwa mdomo, wakanifunua nguo zote, wakaniweka hapa ndani mchanga. Mimi mwenye alinifunua nguo mpaka kwa nguo yangu ya ndani ilikuwa mchanga tupu. Wakaniweka mpaka masikio mchanga, kila mahali nywele yote nilijaa mchanga.
And in the shocking incident, Melen's mother was also not spared, while Melen's sons were forced to lick the sand to remain in the family.
Akamkataa kwenda kurusha mchanga. Sinamwambia hakuna haja ya kurusha mchanga, wao nia yao ilikuwa ni watoto ya mwenyewe na mimi mwenyewe nikapelekea yeye. Mimi ndio karibu kupiga nduru. Sasa ni nini wanaenda kuduria mtoto amevazuliwa mara mbili, ndio anaenda kupigwa kama mnyama kweli. Wananchi mliokoe justice, wamsaidie, sijui na sikujua kama nitafikia kufanyiwa hivyo.
It's reported that Mellon was suspected of being involved in the death of her ex-husband, a situation that resulted in the pressure to pour sand into the grave to prove whether it was true or not.
If there is doubt, ikiwa wazee wana swala juu ya kifo cha huyu ambaye amekufa, basi ilikuwa inalazimishwa. Kwa nini? Ili kuondoa zile fikra kwamba hukuhusika katika hicho kifo.
DCI detectives have confirmed the arrest of 3 men with others still at large. ODM leader Raila Odinga has insisted that he'll continue to defend the rights of Kenyans who survived election violence. In a speech delivered by Nairobi Senator Edwin Sifuna, Odinga stressed that he'll remain steadfast in defending the rights of victims who survived the horrific violence that followed the general election. Odinga also called for more steps to be taken to protect human rights and dignity in the country, as well as advocate for the recognition and fair treatment of those whose rights have been violated.
I understand that a handful of victims have been in court since 2011 seeking justice and reparation. Even more disappointing is that whereas we hoped to draw a red line following the PEV experience, the same patterns of gross human rights violations continue today. I have been consistent and will continue to stand firm for the rights of victims to truth, justice and reparation.
That's the news why I'm La Ubaga.
.5 Spice FM, Kisumu.
All right, let's see what's happening with traffic this morning at a few minutes after 8 o'clock, and it's still busy in the city this morning. Wherever you're going, you will find a little bit of it. As you then come off of the northern bypass, there is some traffic that's then touching and going towards Kiambu Road. Actually, quite a lot of traffic coming off of Kiambu Road. And on the Thika Superhighway as well, just in that direction, there is traffic. Kiambu Road, busy. Also, as you come off of Outer Ring, there's traffic that's come off of Kangunda Road, and some of it's trying to make its way onto Kangunda Road going in the direction of Njiro. Busy here. And then also we're looking at traffic right around Chiromo, coming in from museums, heading out then towards this whole area of Ojija Road, and there is some traffic as then you approach Muranga Road, so that is very, very busy getting onto the roundabout. Langata Road also, we're going to find that it gets busier as you get in past that Magadi Road junction, coming in from Karen. All of that is doing the business this morning. Very, very busy Tuesday, and it doesn't help that the rain is coming down, so we like the rain, but we want to be very careful. Fog lights up, you will need them because it's busy with the rain as well. Let's talk and keep things moving. Help us out. SpiceFM KE on X, hashtag the Situation Room.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
At 6 minutes after 8 o'clock into the third hour of Kenya's biggest conversation this rainy Tuesday morning, but we keep it because the show will definitely go on. Kenya's biggest conversation. Just in case you're wondering, our live streams are up on X, on Facebook and on YouTube. And our audience is on KTN as well. Karibuni sana. Everybody listening around the country, the region, and indeed the globe. We're getting into another round of conversations this morning. And I will say his name, Brian Odhiambo, 2 months and 7 days, has been missing. We don't know where he is. We do not know if he's dead or alive, but it's necessary for us to say his name. He disappeared in very unclear circumstances in terms of what happened. And he represents tens of other Kenyans who we cannot find. Mukuria comes into mind as well. His mother still does not know where he is. He went missing on the 25th of June. She still does not know if he's dead or alive. Again, represents a number of Kenyans who go missing, who've been disappeared, who've been killed extrajudicially. We do not know where they are. And to secure rights of those who remain alive, who feel the need to open their mouths, we continue to have these conversations. And those are some of the things that we do on this show every day. We'll get into a rights conversation this hour, and I'll let you know who our guest is in just a bit. But that's something to think about. Now, There are education conversations that take place, Dennis, and what are some of the things that we talk about when it comes to platforms for folks?
We talked about the pathway that ALX gives you, and through sponsorship and scholarships that you get for you to get there. But let's just talk about some of the institutions that you get to go to, because we talk about global universities. And these, imagine studying at institutions like Vanderbilt University, Macalester College, Patton University, Hamilton College, Bates College, Tufts University, UC Berkeley, or the University of Chicago. And this is just but a glimpse, because we have many other universities that you can join through the ALX platform. Now, these are just a few of the university partners you get through ALX, and ALX is a pathway that opens doors for young Kenyan high school graduates to be able to join these universities, global universities that are doing really, really well. And for detailed information, how you will get here, you go to www.alxafrica.com/join-pathway. That right there gets you to these global universities. You get to do what it is you love.
Asante sana. Fantastic and great for that. Thank you very much. We're talking about rights this morning. There have been too many a conversation around what is happening and how people have disappeared. We don't know what's going on with them. That somebody can open their mouth on what is new media today, social media, in whatever shape or form that takes, and then they don't know if they're going to wake up tomorrow morning. We saw the devastating position of a young woman last week who is a big social media blogger. She made a post last week, or the week before last, and then she disappeared for 4 days and then showed up with severe bodily harm and, terrible injuries. And the question is, where are our rights? And that's the conversation that we have this morning. Kenya at crossroads on its human rights situation. Wallace Ndero is here with us, and he is the research and advocacy advisor for the Defenders Coalition. Wallace, a happy Situation Room welcome to you.
Thank you very much for having me here this morning. Very grateful to be part of this conversation, which is very important and pertinent. As you highlighted earlier, we have a crisis, so to speak, in this country in terms of human rights violations and freedoms. So glad to be here to have this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for honoring that invitation. And even as we do, CT Muga goes around the continent every week. He comes in, as you must know, with a proverb from a different country.
Yes, he does.
And he's going to share where we are this week, and he'll share the proverb, and of course we'll ask you to interpret that.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Super.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
We are still in the coup belt, but this time around, the thing I want to point out is we are in the Sahel. Now, the Sahel region in this continent refers to a place which, if you're polite, you'd say it's semi-arid. If you're to be honest, you'd say it's predominantly arid. And the country from whence we get our proverb this week are in that region. Close to 90% of the land mass is part of the Sahara Desert. Nonetheless, it is a country rich in minerals. Rich. It's a country rich in culture. It has an interesting mixture of Berber and Arab communities who intermarried. They form communities that, as I said, very unique. But apart from just being in the coup belt, it also represents the tragedy of Africa in the sense that African countries are rich in minerals and it has some of the poorest people on the planet. This country is one of the poorest countries on the continent. And if you're one of the poorest countries in the continent, you're also one of the poorest countries in the world. They are poor countries, but we do well with our poverty. We rank very, very highly in our poverty. It's the 11th largest country in Africa and 28th largest country in the world. Population isn't that big, just around 4.3 million. The proverb: if you watch your pot, your food will not burn. Now, I clarified in the previous hour that the pot I refer to here is not your belly. I am referring to the cooking vessel. Yes, if you watch it, your food will not burn. What do you think of the proverb, and what do you think it means?
I think to me it means that if you are wary of a situation, you can be able to say, for example, be averting a bad disaster, for example. If I give it, this can apply, of course, in our daily lives, where we are conscious of our environments, we are conscious of our surroundings. So in that particular scenario, then if anything was to happen, you'll be able to respond very quickly. Because when you're cooking, mostly, if you just, especially tea, for example, if you just turn away for a minute, for a second, it will boil over and spill. But if you're looking at that particular tea cooking all through, it will not spill, it will not spill over. So I think for me, the proverb means that we need to be very aware of our situations, aware of our circumstances, and be able to take appropriate actions where necessary.
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk about milk and water and tea, because water on its own will bubble and boil, but it won't really spill.
No.
But you put tea leaves, spills. You add milk, it spills. But your point is very well made. Thank you.
Indeed.
Yeah, thank you
it
very
is
much.
quite. So, there are too many stories. In 2025, I mean, I'm not even going to talk about 2024 and beyond that. Already in 2025, we're in the third month of the year, and there are too many stories about folks who've opened their mouth to then be able to express themselves freely, and then have either died or disappeared. That's the thing. That there are people. Too many, and in my opinion, one is too many.
One is too many.
One is too many of an individual who says something and then turns up, beaten within an inch of their life, or that actually died. And this is where we are. Are we at a crossroads when it comes to the human rights situation in the country? And I'm going to also then point out the fact that, you had visiting royals last week who made statements, and one of the things that they did bring out was human rights. So where is Kenya with the human rights situation today?
Thank you very much. So where we are right now currently in this country, in terms of human rights, we are doing poorly. We're doing terribly. We are not adhering to our constitution, which provides for our rights in Chapter 4. We are not adhering to a lot of regional, international instruments which we ratified as a country. And the reason why we can say Kenya is at a crossroads is, one, Kenya is currently an elected member of the Human Rights Council, and they'll be in the council for the next 3 years. And the reason why we're saying we're at a crossroads is because now Kenya has to make a very important decision regarding human rights situation internally. And when we do an introspection of ourselves, we'll be able to appreciate that we are not doing well. One of the criteria which are usually used by the General Assembly during the election of members to the Human Rights Council, they usually elect from the 105 members of the UN. They usually look into the candidates, human rights track record and his commitment to human rights. And so if we're being very honest, and when Kenya came up for candidature and was elected to the council, then the question will be, did they actually look into the country's human rights situation? Have we actually made commitments to safeguard rights and freedoms of this country? And have we taken appropriate measures to do so? The answer to that question to me will be a no, because when you look at what has been highlighted just earlier on during the commencement of this conversation, we appreciate we're doing very poorly. When you have people being disappeared, their rights are being violated. When you have people's bodies being found in thickets and bushes and rivers, people's rights are being violated. So as a country, we cannot be then the ones to be mandated to promote human rights on a global scale while we ourselves are doing significantly very poorly. And that's the challenge that we have. So the crossroads is Kenya ready and willing, being on the seat of the council, to be able now to right its wrong in terms of ensuring rights are safeguarded, freedoms are ensured, and Kenyans can actually be able to exist in a space where they don't have any fear. Posting on social media right now, for example, leads to a violation of the right to expression, but also leads to another, violation of other rights. Article 29 talks about you cannot, freedom from torture, inhumane, degrading treatment, and how many of these Kenyans are actually going through that? The lady you mentioned earlier, Article 29 for her clearly was violated beyond the other articles we could make reference to. So Kenya has to make a decision. That's why we're at a crossroads in terms of, are we now ready to do a proper introspection of ourselves? Are we ready to call ourselves for a small meeting like we usually say and appreciate where we are in terms of our human rights track record? Are we doing well? And if we're not doing well, how can we better it?
Can I ask this question?
Yes.
Human rights, there is clearly a bar that we use to measure.
Yes.
And that bar is what leads us to look at the track record of a country as represented by the people in leadership. That brings us to the word crisis. So human rights and the progression towards achieving it is aspirational.
Yes.
Okay, now, what measure then do we use when we say we are in a crisis? Because I'm asking this question in this respect. Even as we look at rights of individuals being abrogated, what about the freedoms that people still have despite? Because if you give the example of our country, one could argue that it's in the attempt to express these freedoms that we see the abrogation of the same freedoms. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, if you look at, if I can give it a quantum, the expressions that we see of freedoms of right from different players vis-a-vis the negative response and reaction that amounts to a violation of these rights, which one weighs heavier?
No, that's a very good question, because then when it comes to human rights and fundamental freedoms, right, the measure usually is how well are they being implemented in the country, and especially when it comes to progression and applicability of that, mostly for socio-economic rights, and that's why we appreciate they're usually implemented progressively. But again, also the question then will be, you may have it on paper, but how is it effective in your country? You know, and I'm positive right now, if we were to take the Constitution and go article per article, we'll be able to appreciate the violations that occur in it, right? You have laws in place, you have a constitution in place, you have treaties and regional instruments, and you have ratified. Then the question is, are the people in your country being able to enjoy these rights fully? That would be one. Secondly, and if there is any violation of these particular rights, are there any redress mechanisms to be able to address these particular rights? And if there are none, then, or probably they are very limited, then the concern will be, then we can say there's a very serious situation in that particular country regarding human rights. When you look at how countries are categorized in terms of enjoyment of rights, Kenya is country categorized as obstructed in terms of people being able to enjoy their rights and freedoms. Obstructed, why? Because you have in place, our question is it's deemed to be one of the most progressive ones in the continent, right? And Chapter 4 is very clear. But now there are very many blockades along the way, which will now bar Kenyans from being able to enjoy these rights and freedoms. So in as much as we have rights, the question then will be, are people enjoying them? That's the question. And if they are they doing it fully? And if they are doing it fully, then we are good to go. But every single time we are going to be looking at the country in itself, and reports will be made, right? If we go, for example, to the Kenya National Commission Human Rights website, we'll be able to get a lot of reports which document violation of rights and freedoms of people. So to answer your question is, they are there, yes, but are they being enjoyed fully by the people? And if the answer is in the negative, then that's a situation we need to be able to address holistically.
So the situation that you speak to pretty much is where the constitution of the land gives the populace right, those that they should enjoy, rightfully so. But then again, there is now the implementation aspect of these rights and making sure that they citizens operate in them and enjoy them is where the problem is at. Because if we talk about freedom to expression, that is a right given by the Constitution. But when you say you are, so it is the implementing body making sure that these rights are enjoyed, that is failing at it. So then if that is the situation, we know that is the problem. What needs to be done? And from the Defenders Coalition, part of this civil rights group, what is the conversation that perhaps you're having, and what has been the response?
So one of the things we are right in terms of implementation, right? And of course, the duty of this, ensuring these rights are safeguarded is usually to the state, and then the state will trickle it down to the other organs which they'll work with to ensure that these rights are actually safeguarded. But again, also what we're doing in terms of ensuring these rights and freedoms are safeguarded is doing a lot of advocacy around ensuring that, one, there's accountability for violation of rights and freedoms. We appreciate that we fall short in terms of accountability, and a good example is what happened last year during the protests. We have not seen people being held accountable for their action, especially for questions on police brutality, as well as people who've seen a lot of injuries, people who are killed. The other thing we look at is, do we have, we push for the strengthening of existing mechanisms to be able to be utilized for defend these rights, right? When you talk about institutions in place, are they effective? For example, do they have the adequate resources to be able to ensure that these rights are protected? So most of the time, you'll find civil society, Black Defenders Coalition, will be pushing to ensure that if its funding is adequate. For example, the Kenya National Commission of Human Rights, do they have the requisite resources, and especially both financial and human, to be able to ensure that, given their task of ensuring the safeguard and protection of this particular rights in this country, is it happening? When you look, for example, at IPOA, for instance, they're supposed to be investigating a lot of all these issues we talk about, police brutality. Do they have the resources to do it? And so for us, it's basically to call out the government, most especially, to be able to ensure that these particular institutions, this particular organizations, so to speak, are adequately funded. Because when they're weakened, then at the end of the day, violations will occur, and the redress will be very minimal and near zero. What else we do is we utilize not only national spaces, including courts if we need to, but also utilize regional and international mechanisms. Regional being especially the African Commission of Human and People's Rights. They usually have ordinary sessions through the entire year. For this year, they'll have 4 sessions, right? So, and especially for civil society, utilize this space now to be able to clearly highlight the human rights situations in the country, right? When you go to the commission and then you present your statement, the statement can be adopted and recommendations made. Last year, unfortunately, during the commission sessions, we ourselves had been present at the commission sessions and wrote a very clear statement of the situation of human rights in the country. Unfortunately, but of course the commission cannot be compelled, they did not pick up the recommendations, and appreciating the situation Kenya was in last year remember in March with the floods, and then what that translated to in terms of other socio-economic rights, and then also the issues of enforced disappearance, extrajudicial and abductions. We can utilize international spaces, and the Universal Periodic Review before the Human Rights Council is another thing that is actually very important. Kenya is coming up for review this year in May. Before the Human Rights Council, despite it being a member of the Human Rights Council. And so that also presents an opportunity for civil society organizations, especially during the pre-sessions, usually take place a month, at least two months before the actual review is actually conducted, to be able to also paint a very clear picture of the human rights situation in the country. When the country itself, when they do their state reports and you read that state report, you might think you live in a utopia. Everything seems to be working. We're putting in place these policies, we're putting in place these particular measures, and then tomorrow you wake up, everything will be okay. But that's not the actual situation. So we have to utilize all these spaces, all these mechanisms, because at the end of the day, when it comes to advocacy, it's driving change, and we believe change is achievable.
I mean, Wallace, it will sound crazy, but I think that, and you can stop me if I'm wrong, but a lot of organizations that operate in this space, and I think it's beyond dealing with a resource issue. If you want to look at IPOA, for example, give me one example. We can talk about resources until the cows come home. But give me one example over the last 10 years where a case has been prosecuted, where an officer, for example, has been brutal against a citizen, and all the evidence is pointing, but one case where this has happened, 2 cases, 3 cases where this has happened, and with regularity. So I almost refuse to imagine that it is a resource issue beyond a goodwill issue. When we talk about dealing with rights, it's not as though we're dealing with your food and bread and butter situation. So do we have a resource issue when it comes to dealing with human rights? Or do we have a desire and will issue when it comes to dealing with human rights?
I agree. I will agree and say it's to me it's both, right? And of course, goodwill is very important, because when you have laws in place, for example, then it will be the goodwill of say, for example, if it's the nation, to be able to ensure, the state, for example, to ensure that these particular rights are safeguarded. But it's also a resource issue as well, because when we look at, for example, IPOA, and I'm not here to vouch for them, but to answer your question, they're supposed equally to carry out investigations, and especially when it comes to issues of police conduct and misconduct. And then you find they always they are not adequately funded. Then that would hinder their operations. But also beyond the resources, then it will be how then can they continue to operate, ensure that they safeguard these rights beyond resources.
Sorry, can I interject?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm insisting that it is a goodwill issue. Because if you set up IPOA, you set up the independent policing authority, and then you don't fund it.
Yes.
Not because you cannot, but that you do not.
Exactly.
That to me is that you're actually not interested in making sure that police officers actually don't abrogate the rights of Kenyans. Because if you were, then you would fund it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not a resource issue.
Exactly.
It's a goodwill issue from that level.
Exactly.
Whereby you have an entire authority that has been set up. It doesn't do squiddly did to make sure that this thing is actually done.
It's what I spoke about earlier in terms of weakening, institutions, and that's one of the ways they actually do it. So you find the institution is well set up, as statutorily and everything else, but then of course at the state level, that's where the goodwill comes in. Because, and I agree with you, if you are deliberate about ensuring that human rights and freedoms in your country are safeguarded, one of the things that you need to do is ensure that all these institutions and mechanisms available are adequately resourced to ensure that they can be able to issue redresses where violations occur. Goodwill also will come in the part of ensuring that beyond the resourcing and all the required measures are to be taken to ensure that they function adequately. So the issue of goodwill, now we'll trickle back to what I talked about, weakened institutions, and they're very deliberate about it. And I'll agree with you, it's very deliberate, because if even if you take an example, for example, you have a company and you have people who are working there and you're not paying them adequately, probably refused to withhold the salary for a very long time, they will not function as they're supposed to function. Right? So it's the same thing with these institutions. If they're adequately resourced and you actually give them the proper leeway to be able to do their work very well, we'll not be having this conversation. And I agree with you. It's an issue of goodwill. And then when you come now to to the prosecution aspect of it as well, it's unless a case is really, really pushed, and especially when it comes to police brutality, you find that they don't go anywhere. And a good example is for the late Willie Kimani. It took effort from civil society, Law Society of Kenya, to actually see that these particular police officers were found guilty and were sentenced. But how many other Kenyans are brutalized and cannot be able to access these remedies? How many will be able to go to, say, for example, come to us as a coalition or go to LSK and say, our rights were violated, how can we be redressed? And you'll be surprised when you interact with, Kenyans, ordinary Kenyans day to day, they'll tell you their rights were violated, especially each and every Kenyan can tell you of a right which was violated to them, but with no redress, right? So are there structures in place? They are. Do we have adequate, is there goodwill to have them functioning properly? No, there isn't. And the Kenya National Commission, for example, as a mechanism, and its core mandate is to ensure that the rights and freedoms are safeguarded. And they'll tell you every single day when a new budget is being read, their fund is reduced. What does that mean to the commission? They'll try their best. But again, also we have to go back to appreciating that they need to be.
It's not a priority.
To them, it's not a priority.
Can the citizens play any role?
Yes.
In getting this well upped? Because right now, from the way we're going about our discussion, it's at rock bottom. How, if they can, would the citizens play a role? Because the rights we speak of are the rights of the citizens. So how do citizens understand, and with the understanding act upon, ensuring that institutions that are set up for their benefit, because this is what it is for, actually get the requisite support? Because again, the support comes from their money, their taxes. Can citizens actually move this needle? Because right now it's not just stuck, it's on a downward movement. Can citizens help?
I think they really can. And I think one of the ways we can be able to engage the citizens to be able to take up this is we need to be able to have adequate civic education in this country.
Right.
And you'll be able to appreciate a lot of Kenyans do not appreciate even this mechanism exist and what they exist for. It is only when somebody is faced with an issue that they'll come to appreciate the Kenya National Commission, for example, or IPOA, or even any other organization that is mandated to safeguard their rights and freedoms. And so after they're adequately engaged, and this can be through barazas, can be through forums where each and every day have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Once you have people who are adequately who have adequate information about one, their rights and freedoms, and then you'll be able to tell them about the mechanisms that are in existence and how can this actually happen.
So then the question is, what then do they do with that after they've been adequately informed and they're aware? What do they do with that next?
Exactly.
Let's take a break and come back and say, okay, so this is what you then are able to do with it, and these are some of the results that you actually can see. And then I'm also curious, when Kenya gets graded for its human rights record, what happens? Do you sit at the back of the class? Do you sit and raise your hands up and kneel in the corner? Let's find out about what happens with that when we come back from this break. Wallace Ndero is our guest this hour, and we're looking at the crossroads that Kenya might be at on its human rights situation. Let's go to the break when we're imagining about biting into your favorite foods, hot or cold, and that you don't have to deal with any kind of tooth sensitivity. So is it a stone cold ice cream or a hot coffee? Whatever it is, remember that you don't have to imagine anymore. You can have it just the way you like it. And this is because Sensodyne is here to give you the ultimate relief from tooth sensitivity. How do we know that? Because it's the #1 brand recommended by dentists, and you don't have to worry, because you know what? A happy mouth is a happy mind. Sensodyne for tooth sensitivity relief and everyday oral health. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start the weather with SpiceFM.
Cloudy conditions and still with some rain in Nairobi at 17 and cloudy into Nakuru, and 18 and cloudy in Nyeri. Eldoret at 15 is sunny with sunny conditions at 29 in Mombasa and 30 in a sunny Malindi. We're looking at partly sunny conditions at 21 in Kisumu and at 20 in a sunny Kakamega. It's 19 and sunny into Kampala, while Dar es Salaam at 26 is sunny. It's 18 and sunny into Johannesburg. It's Mogadishu sunny at 29, while Addis Ababa at 15 is sunny this morning. 26 and mostly clear conditions in Lagos, while it's partly sunny at 24 in Kinshasa.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. SpiceFM.
Spice up your life.
All right, we still are in traffic hour, taking a quick look at what's happening on the roads this morning. Coming in from Ngong, not too bad today as you get onto Ngong Road, and some traffic then as you get closer to the city. There's some traffic coming off of Naivasha Road, and we're going to deal with that. It's not too bad now. As you get then towards Wayaki Way, there's traffic getting onto, you find yourself at Chiromo with some traffic. There's a whole beehive activity here, stuff that's coming in from the Thika Superhighway, using that back route from Parklands, and then also Lower Kabete through towards Spring Valley. So that whole area very busy. And then on the Eastern Bypass, traffic going towards the Cabanas interchange, also at bumper to bumper level. Kangunda Road is busy, with still some traffic coming off the Thika Superhighway. That's busy. We'll keep an eye on things. SpiceFM KE on X, hashtag the Situation Room.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Wallace Ndero is our guest this hour, and we're looking at Kenya at a crossroads when it comes to human rights. Tell me, just before we went to the break, Wallace, you're talking about making sure that civic education is up par, and the question is, so now you're educated, you have the information,
but
you know
we're educated. How do you determine that people are educated? How do you know
that they've gotten enough information?
Exactly,
and now they know?
Because the thing about education, before it can be manifest, you cannot see somebody is educated. It can be informed. Yes, but when someone is educated, the education manifests in the person. So,
as well as we just have that conversation, there is also the aspect of, when we talk about human rights, there is the aspect of the government implementing the same. And the citizenry as well, understanding their role in making sure that human rights are equally upheld, because you find that the citizens themselves are allowed to be used. So in terms of education, and as City says, determining that they're educated, I mean, there is a disconnect.
I think that's why I mentioned it, using the term civic education, but of course its purpose is to be able to impart information, and we appreciate this information, of course, cannot be able to impart it all of it all at once, right? But we appreciate if somebody has a know-how of a particular thing, then it becomes a bit easier to be able to navigate through it. Then that might lead to people wanting to get more information about something. So if and especially you'll be surprised, Kenyans out here want to be informed, right? And you'll find people stopping you even on the way and asking you, there's this thing they said on TV about ABCD, what does that even mean? They may not go into the depth of it, for example, to be able to be, like you mentioned, properly educated. And I agree with you, there's no that proper measure to say this particular person is educated, this particular person is educated. But having that information is very, very important, because that information now will create a spiral effect where it's going to be now snowballing of you'd want to know more and more and more. And a good example is during last year's protest, Kenyans who thought were not aware of their rights were now, being found in situations where they want to know more about something, and you could see advocates going online or people with that particular information sharing it, in bits for them to be able to appreciate. So what happens after this? So information is very important, and for me, information is power.
Yeah.
We may talk about civic education because that's the term usually used mostly in this particular space, but it's all about sharing information, and it's relevant information, not just information for the sake of sharing information. And so once we appreciate when they have this information, how then do they use it is a question, right? You now have an informed people. So these are people who are going to be able to appreciate when rights are when things are not working, when things are going wrong. If it's a right that is being violated, how is it being violated, and who is violating it, and what's the redress mechanism? If it's these institutions, how then can we galvanize ourselves together to be able to ensure that this particular institutions are adequately resourced to be able to work?
When you educate or when you pass on knowledge, for instance, do we tell our citizenry that when you fight for your rights, you will be fought back?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me take you back to the time when we had a president called Daniel Arap Moi. It was a single-party state then. Yeah. And there were people who opposed that party directly.
Yes.
And some of them they were members of the party because there was only one party anyway.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, what they stood for were the very things you're talking about. Rights. Not very popular then. But what was the demonstration that people had understood? They kept being voted in. So their people had understood what these people are doing makes perfect sense, and we will support it. Okay?
Yeah.
When we look at June 25th, a watershed moment for this country, the Gen Z had got it.
Yeah.
They had actually got it. They had understood, our rights are being violated here. And these old fogies don't seem to be doing anything about it.
Yeah.
So let's
show them a thing or two.
Let's make a statement or so. They understood it over time.
Yeah.
Now, that was the beginning of them understanding what their power citizens are.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, when we continue with this, I'm still stuck on that knowledge and education. See, there is knowledge which brings you power.
Yeah.
And then with power comes responsibility.
Definitely.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because sometimes this is lost.
Yeah.
And the quarrel we tend to have with those in leadership and power is that this responsibility bit, they don't seem to get. Yes. We give you our money and you just do what you like with it. And we're telling you, we want you to do this. This is what we agreed we would do.
Yeah.
The nexus. How do you get? Because a government that is willing to set up institutions, like the National Human Rights Commission, it tells you they have gotten part of the message. That's why they've set it up. And once it's set up, it's there.
Yeah.
Okay? How do we get these institutions which you've said we have to actually be active? How do we breathe life into it? Because whether it is IPOA, when they do what they're supposed to do, the changes we talk about will actually become manifest. How do we get them to do what they're supposed to do?
Yeah. It's a very good question, because when we, and I agree, but also with in terms of information, and we usually want to push for where we ensure things are done and done in the rightful manner, including being able to utilize the mechanisms we have and the laws that we have, for example. And even last year, the Gen Z's protest was them exercising their right as provided for in the Constitution. But even if you're going to take that route, for example, we have to do it within the confines of the law. So, right? So everything that we do has to be within the confines of the law. As mentioned, also with responsibilities, not on, even we citizens have responsibilities ourselves in ensuring that even when we're enjoying these rights, they do not spill over to violate others as well. And the question about with this information, then once you appreciate, as I go into your question about how do we make these institutions work, is when people appreciate what mechanisms they have in place and how can people to utilize them is very, very important. And if it means civil action, then that be it. But we need to be able to, properly, address these issues head on.
I'm hearing you, but I'm just, I'm at a crossroads here because, usually we can draw from examples of other jurisdictions, and I remember the case that went crazy viral in the US was the Jimmy Floyd case, where the police officer essentially stepped on his neck and he died. Right? That happened. But where's the police officer today? He's in jail. Right? Because the system pushed for a situation where you cannot allow something like this to happen. So what happens as a result of that? That either it serves as a deterrent or it serves as a wake-up call for anybody else operating in the system who then will say, hang on a minute, it's not the right thing to do, but at the same time, if I do it, the chances of me landing in jail are very high. So that's what it does. When you have a situation whereby there is recourse for something that happens, whereby, and this is not passion, it is fact that young black men in the United States were usually having their rights abrogated by virtue of the fact of how they looked. And it went on for years. So it took a man to die, in this manner, for people to stand up and say, come on, we cannot allow this to continue because it's a young black man today, tomorrow it's a white young woman. So they said, you know what, we're not going to allow this to continue anymore. They were educated for years before that. They had the mechanisms, they had the authority, but it took somebody going to jail and serving a life, and serving currently a long sentence for people to sit up and say, hang on a minute, we can't allow the status quo to happen. Now, if we want to come back here, I'm still looking for something whereby we have so many human rights organizations who operate. We have people who do civic education. We have people who are talking about it as long as the day is. But then we don't see that. What's the thing that happens? Sure, we do see that there's some police officers who've gone to jail for life because of things that they did to inmates. For example, there's a one famous Thika case. And also the Mlolongo case as well. We see that. But these things that we see, where even as late as yesterday, there are people who open their mouths and they say things and they're hurt in ways that are unimaginable, unspeakable, unthinkable. And we just say, oh yeah, we don't have the resources, we'll wait, maybe something. I mean, come on. How will we ever get past the crossroads if we're still dealing with, book and pen?
Exactly. And I totally agree, because that's what we're talking about when we do an introspection of ourselves, right?
George Floyd, sorry, his name was George Floyd.
Floyd. No, it's okay. When you do a proper introspection of ourselves, right, we are the ones who are supposed to make sure these systems do work, right? How do we navigate through the impunity, for example? Why would somebody violate a right and get away with it? And there are in place laws which can be utilized to be able to ensure that a particular person, does not go scot-free. But we've developed a culture, so to speak, where, and especially people in authority and power, will be able to do what they can and will do, violate a right and be on their way, right? So it's one upon us to be able to reverse this culture, so to speak, in terms of when you violate a right, you can actually be held accountable for that particular issue. And also for me, it's an accountability issue. Nobody wants to be held accountable for their misdoings, right? We find ways to navigate through situations and we emerge from the other end of it. If we develop a proper human rights culture in this particular country, where even the smallest of violations is actually, there is retribution for it, then things might change. But also appreciating that our country, like mentioned, we have a history of rights violations in this country. And also we have a history of where people are not, there's no retribution for people who commit these violations. So when that continues, it's perpetuated, even with the informed citizenry, then nothing might much might actually happen. You find, and especially for civil society organizations, they usually do the best that they can. Remembering, of course, with the state and its machinery in place, they can easily push you over. But we need to be able to have a change of culture, right? And when you talk about Kenya being a crossroads in human rights situations, that particular thing, are we ready to make that change? Are we ready now, we are on the Human Rights Council, to be able to have a proper introspection of ourselves and say, all these things we've been doing, we can change them. How do we change them, for example? If we have this mechanism in place, like I mentioned, how do we make them work? And I agree, it's the goodwill of it. All these things will trickle down to goodwill. And the absence of goodwill, whether you have executive or judiciary or parliament, in its absence, it will not work. So how we ourselves now have to continue this conversation of how do we change the culture, where now we can be able to see things are happening.
Right.
And minus that, we're going to be having the same conversation of
you know what, listen, don't beat yourself too much. The progress we speak of in this country and the profundity of it speaks to the existence of an understanding of human rights and the need to have those rights applied. It is the reason why a conversation like this is actually taking place. Because there was a time you have this conversation, you're being waited for.
Waited for?
Yeah, so that
interrupt the conversation.
Yeah, so that you can be given a government scholarship.
Yeah. They wouldn't even wait for you to finish.
So the introspection and the need to be able to actually bring about change is necessary. I'm going back to where I started. How do you get the citizenry to internalize this? And it can't be on the national level because that's too far-fetched. It is understanding it at the local level. We have an MCA whom we have elected. And this person, we never see them. And the things they told us they'll do, they never do. MCA, somebody you can, ahead of Mjikumi, a local representative.
Nyumbakumi.
Yes. What do I call it?
Mjikumi.
Okay, thank you very much.
10 cities, supposed to 10 houses, but it's okay.
Yes. A leader, a religious leader whose pronounced beliefs and actions do not tally. And yet we have them. If at the local level we can take these people to task, one, with the purpose of correctiveness, because some people may need help. Okay? But we understand what we can do. It is then easier to move that conversation to the constituency level. Much, much easier. It is much, much easier than to take that to the county level. And the representatives who we have at the county level. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because any discussion that is supposed to have an impact has to start from the lowest possible common denominator. If it gets there, and it often means working with groups who already do this, and they exist. So, looking at Kenya and looking at where we are, and looking at the problems that we have when it comes to human rights, bodies and institutions that are involved in this process, let's park IPOA aside and look at the police service. How does the communication on human rights involve and include the police service? Police service here is AP plus GSU. Okay?
Plus regular police.
Yes. How does this involve the judiciary? Because we adjudicate things which we have difficulty with the judiciary. How up to date are they? The fact that they adjudicate over the law doesn't mean that they practice it. Well, their judgments tend to impact hugely on all these things that we do. And it isn't when a human rights violation is brought to them. No. If it's an economic issue, it has human rights directly embedded in it. If it is an issue to do with communal property, it has human rights directly embedded in it. How do these things play an important role, and how does it impact their decision-making process? Then let's come down to the dodo in the conversation, Parliament. How
your favorite set of people? Yes,
my favorite test.
Yeah,
set of people. How do we get to them? Because much as they're a despicable lot, the truth of the matter is that, okay, barring a few individuals here and there, who in numbers statistically are irrelevant. How do we get them? Because given the import of what they do, it impacts on our lives very, very directly. How do we get them to understand that the decisions they make have just about the most dire and impactful consequences on human lives in the country? How do we do this?
I will start with the communities, and like you mentioned, we have started the lowest denominator, and that's basically every Kenyan. And so, as you mentioned, and I agree, we have quite a number of organizations, especially community-based organizations, community groups organizations, which work within the grassroots within the communities to ensure that the change starts there. And when we have that conversation, that particular juncture, and appreciating this is work which will be done over time, then we'll be able, like mentioned, to progress on progressively. So a lot of work is happening there. A lot of information sharing is happening within the communities, because once they appreciate, what can be done, what cannot be done, then they actually will be able to move forward, and we'll be able to move from one stature to the other. And I can confirm we work with human rights defenders from across the country in all their diversity, and I can attest to the fact that they are very busy, in the grounds, their communities, engaging diverse people, whether it's community leaders, whether it's cultural leaders, for example, to be able to ensure that this convention is being had and continues. And that's very important. So once that happens, then you can be able now to continue elevating up all the way to the highest level. When you now bring in other stakeholders in place, and of course now arms of government, then the convention, of course, will still continue. And for Parliament, both whether it's the Senate or the National Assembly, and one of the ways we found to engage them, unfortunately, is you have now to find an ally within that particular space. And in terms of allyship, then you it's not a guarantee that what you're pushing for, you'll be able to get it. People have had meetings with the particular committees of Parliament, and they've raised particular issues before them. And then once that is done, it's over. Then you're left with a huge task of doing a lot of lobbying, for example, with these parliamentarians who can be able to help you push for your agenda in Parliament. And that should not be the case. They're in place not because we are supposed to follow them, trying to ask them for what is supposed to be done for our sake. They're supposed to actually also take up the initiative to do it. For example, when you look at some of the laws which have been passed as a result of lobbying by civil society, and it took a lot of work and effort to be able for this to happen. So if that is going to be the route we'll be taking, then we're going to fail. We're not going to be achieving what we want to achieve, right? If, say, for example, we have a whole departmental committee which is tasked with dealing with issues of human rights in Parliament, what are they doing about it, right? When violations are occurring, you have to wait for the violation to occur for them to call for a sitting to be able to address these issues. What issues are being presented before the floor of Parliament, right? To say these particular issues are growing concern to us and want them to be addressed. Right? Once they get to Parliament, they sit pretty, and that's it.
Do you think it's a priority? Let's just be honest. When we talk about the different things, the different balls that are up in the air right now, do you think that when you look at the file at your in tray every morning as government, that human rights is on top of the tray?
Unfortunately, to them, it's not a priority. Clearly, it's not a priority. Because if it was a priority, with having people, both heads would be rolling in terms of accountability of human rights violators, right? I don't understand, for example, why we do not have a mass number of police officers being prosecuted right now for the violations which occurred in 2024. We do not, for example, if we talk about the Baby Pendo case, which has been in courts for over 5 years now.
Oh my God, Wallace, every day. We're not even talking about 2024, we're talking about every day. We're talking about when somebody goes to get a police abstract, for example, and a girl is asked to give sexual favors, to ask for a police abstract, or to ask for a P3 form. She's come from being violated by another party and is being asked to give sexual favors to get a P3 form, which is a free thing. What are we talking about? We're not even talking about one event. And that is my question. That we talk about everyday entrenched abrogation of these rights is taking place. So the question is, when do we get to the point where everybody then is on tenterhooks and you realize and say, you know what, we need to create a scenario so strong where everybody is aware, the perpetrators as well as the victims or would-be victims or would-be perpetrators, that everybody is so aware every day, all the time, that hold on a minute, we can't allow this to happen. When do we get to that point? The person who is arrested and asked to pay 200,000 shillings, who cannot afford 100 shillings to feed her children on that day, and is taken to court, and before you can say Jack's your uncle, she's thrown in the back of a truck. How many rights along those lines have been? What is the right of this individual to have a dustbin where she can actually throw that trash and didn't find one? Who asked those questions? And these are the little things that we talk about. We're not just talking about being beaten up in a protest. We're talking about things that happen on a daily basis for which rights are being abrogated. Can we get to the place that we are so saturated with this knowledge that everybody's on tenterhooks and will not allow a situation that we see? And these are the real issues, in my opinion.
No, I totally agree, and that's why I mentioned that when you look at right, and I agree, because we tend to look at the very big things that have actually happened for us to be able to, and that's actually in my notes, and I was telling my colleague earlier, we never appreciate the small things, and these small things will be violations themselves. When you actually add to juxtapose it with the right, it has been violated. And for me, as mentioned earlier, is a question of how do we now change the culture? Because this now has to change. And I'm glad we're having this conversation in this particular, in this particular time, in this particular space, because it is through such having these conversations that people actually now become aware of those who are not really aware about it, really. And then what we now need to push for is a change in culture. And it's very unfortunate that people usually are so suppressed that they actually, become accustomed to the suppression, accustomed to the violations. If you talk to a Kenyan right now, for example, and they come and tell you my right was violated, a fellow one will tell them, usijali, that usually happens, and that's how we brush it off. And nobody wants to actually, ensure that right which is violated is actually being redressed, right? So how do we change the culture? How do we, as a people ourselves, get to appreciate our rights, our freedoms, and call for accountability? It's also an issue of accountability as well. As I mentioned earlier, nobody wants to be held accountable, even for the small things, right? If you take the example of the police station, this woman is assaulted at the police station. There's a commanding officer in that particular police station. That's the OCS. And report to the OCS. What do? They probably don't do anything about it. You escalate it to the probably OCPD. They don't do anything about it. You go all the way to the regional commander, to the county commissioner, because we have this culture of impunity all along the way, where people don't want to be held accountable, where people don't be responsible for their actions or misactions, right? So even if we have this conversation and all the key actors, including the citizenry, are not part of it, then you're going not to be going anywhere. Because that's what we need to do, right? We can have reviews. Kenyans come up for review, and like you asked earlier, what do? They sit at the back of the room and put their hands up, right? Unfortunately, you'll find reviews will come and then implement. They'll present a state report, and then recommendations will be made. They'll adopt quite a number of them. Last year, the last time Kenya was reviewed was in 2020, and they adopted at least over 100 recommendations from their peers, because it's a peer review mechanism. But if you actually look at it, how have we implemented these particular recommendations? No, we haven't. Kenya is coming up for review again in 2025 in May. The same issues we've been talking about here will come up again in May. So it's a question of how do we now, all of us collectively, and for me, start to deal with it. We need to push for culture change. We need to push for accountability. We need to push for adequate information within the citizenry. We need to be able to have a change progressively. And I believe if the change may not be here and now, but if it comes, we will be able to have a different conversation where rights and freedoms are actually guaranteed and respected. And one conversation that we cannot stop having, and we had it this morning, Wallace Ndero is a research and advocacy advisor with the Defenders Coalition. Kenya at a crossroads when it comes to human rights. Thank you for being here this morning. It's 9 a.m.
Spice up your life.
Good morning, this is the News Wire. I'm Leah Ubaga. The Nelson Makanda-led panel has already begun assessing another group of candidates for the IEBC chairperson position, including Erastus Edang. Others to follow up are Francis Kakai and former Nairobi County Assembly Clerk Jacob Ngwele, as well as Kenya Power Board Chair Joy Brenda Masinde. Currently before the panel is Edang, who says that he has handled elections before and the outcomes have been free and fair.
In 1997, during the general election in December, and again in 2020, in 2002, I served the electoral body as a presiding officer, where I managed the polling station, and I ensured that the voting preparations and the voting, the counting, the tallying, the declaration of results was done in those two respective elections, which were fairly successful, and they ended up with the good outcomes. So, Mr. Chair and distinguished panelists, that is how I got to interact with the work of an electoral management body.
The final round of interviews set for tomorrow will see Lillian Wanjiku, Robert Assemble and Saul Simiyu face the selection panel. Another 105 candidates targeting to fill the 6 IBC commissioner positions will be interviewed from tomorrow all the way to the 24th of next month. Throughout the vetting process, candidates will be evaluated based on their experience, integrity and strategic vision for strengthening Kenya's electoral framework. 3 suspects who were arrested in connection with the murder of Wells Fargo Human Resource Manager Willis Yeko appeared at the Siaya High Court for a pre-trial conference. Victor Ouma, alias Cisco, Duncan Ochieng, alias Tucci, and Samuel Onyango, alias Jabado, who were arrested in October 2024, appeared before Siaya High Court Judge David Kimei. The accused persons who had denied involvement in the murder of the Wells Fargo boss applied for bail through their lawyers as the hearing continues. On the bail application of the third accused, Justice Kimei said that he'll give a ruling on whether the bond shall be granted or not by 8th of May. A decomposing body of the human resource manager was discovered in a shallow stream on 23rd of October 2024, 3 days after he was reported missing in Gem, Yalasid County. Nyamira High Court Judge Wilfrida Okwani has withdrawn from the case between Nyamira County Assembly and former Speaker Enoch Okero. Speaking during the hearing of the case online, Okwani said the alleged bias in the case and even some parliament staff protesting against her performance were the reasons for the withdrawal. The case will be mentioned on April 2nd.
I recall that on 20th March 2025, a mobilized group of protesters comprising mainly of persons believed to be workers of the Nyamira County Assembly appeared at the court premises, chanting inflammatory and defamatory slogans directed at this court, causing tension, confusion, and security breach. Consequently, I hereby recuse myself from hearing this matter alongside another related case involving County Assembly of Nyamira versus Enoch Okero Ogori. I hereby forward the 2 matters to the Principal Judge of the High Court, Mr. Justice Eric Ogola, for his directions and reallocation to another court for hearing and determination.
That's the News Wire. I'm Lea Ubaga.
.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on Spice FM.
In this country, 6 families and 8,000 Kenyans control 90% of the GDP. We are not a country. We are a plantation. We work for Ruto.
When you're telling the judges court orders are papers or they will not obey court orders, they're sitting and you're seeking orders from them. So how are they supposed to interpret it? Isn't it an oxymoron?
When you see a judiciary that seems to be under some control somewhere, you start questioning. We have very powerful governors, but they don't use their offices to serve the people.
If you are not shameful to do what you are doing, why should we protect you?
I'm human. Everybody's human. So when you're told, kuja tuongee, I mean, you'd be a fool to say, staki kuongea today. Conversations have to be had, you know?
People in leadership should only go into leadership if they are ready and willing to change the lot of the people.
The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation.
Okay, let's take a look at how traffic is progressing this morning. Some of that coming off of the Thika Superhighway is still unrelenting, still bumper to bumper in some parts as you get towards Survey. Looks like it is going to be that way for some time. The early morning rain has slowed things down all around. Also, traffic coming in on parts of Ngong Road coming in from Naivasha Road, that is very busy. And if you go westlands on Wayaki Way, busy going towards Chiromo, and also Spring Valley coming in from Lower Kabete, you have some traffic there, Muthaiga and onto Limuru Road, all of that coming into the city. And so we're still watching that particular area, as well as the Eastern Bypass, which more or less has reduced, but then some traffic as you approach Embakasi and then towards the Cabanas interchange. So that's what we're looking at for now. Let's keep an eye on things and see how we keep it moving. SpiceFM KE on X, hashtag the Situation Room.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
A very good morning to you. 7 minutes after 9 o'clock, and then into our final hour of Kenya's biggest conversation this morning. And we take a little bit of a shift, but we talk about issues that are affecting very, very many people around the country today, and we'll get into that conversation soon. And then Dennis has some information for you all when he's telling us about a platform where you can further your education. Yes? No?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the platform we're talking about is the LX pathway. And why is it really important? Because it is connecting young highway graduates to universities across the world, you know. And these registration exercise is ongoing all the way up to the 21st of April 2025. Now, through LX pathway, you'll have the opportunity to study at global universities with options for in-person, hybrid, or online. So you can decide to travel all the way to one of the universities. And what university are we talking about? UC Berkeley, the University of Chicago, and many, many more. You can do it in person, hybrid, that is both in online and physically, or in person. To gain access, you'll complete the comprehensive 8-month LX Pathway Foundations, which will give you the skills such as leadership and entrepreneurship, and the equally communication designed to prepare you for your successful university application. So before you get there, you're trained on how you're going to fit in so that it's easy for you, nothing to do with culture shock when you get there. And for you to get there, you just go to bit.ly/LX Pathways SFM. bit.ly/LX Pathway SFM. You'll get all the information that you need. Remember, this registration exercise is ongoing all the way to April 25th. 2025.
Fantastic.
Yes.
All right. Before we get into our conversation this morning, which is around autism, let me remind you that this morning you're having breakfast, right? A hot cup of coffee, like CT likes. Or that, cold pastry or cold ice cream that you might want to enjoy later, and close your eyes and imagine that you can do that without tooth sensitivity. Then open your eyes, because guess what? You can. How can you do that? Well, you can do that with Sensodyne. And how do we know that you can do this? Well, because it's the #1 brand recommended by dentists. So, the guys who take and tinker about with your teeth are telling you that this is stuff to use. So why not? And it's been recommended. And we also know that if it's happy in here, it's happy up here. So happy mouth equals a happy mind. So you want to think about Sensodyne for tooth sensitivity relief and everyday oral health. Yes. All right. And getting into a number of this conversation for this hour, we're talking about autism. It's a conversation that we have had before, but in my opinion, it's a conversation that we don't have enough in terms of what is happening, in terms of how it's been progressing. And we're talking about the other side of autism today. And we have two guests in the studio today who join us, Dr. Jane Moirori and Perpetua Omondi. Dr. Jane Moirori is a healthcare management expert, while Perpetua Omondi is a founder and Dynamic Occupational Therapy Limited. Ladies, good morning to you both.
Morning.
Good morning. Karibu sana. Thank you for being here this morning. Not an easy topic, but one that's important, and so that we're glad that you're here with us to have this conversation. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of autism, we're going to welcome you to the Situation Room. CT here usually has a proverb, and he goes around Africa every week. Privileged man, this one. And he comes back from a different country with a basket full of proverbs. He'll tell you where he is this week, and then he'll tell you what the proverb is, and then you can tell us what your interpretation of the same would be. All right? Okay.
There is a body on this planet called the Global Slavery Index. You would think that with the understanding that slavery was abolished, that
such a body wouldn't exist.
Yes, exactly. But it appears that even with all the freedoms we speak of and all the democracy we speak of, there are countries that still practice slavery. I'm going to park that and come back to it later. We are in the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, okay, the 11th largest country in Africa, 20th largest country in the world. Population around 4.3 million people. 90% of the country desert, part of the Sahara Desert, but a country rich in minerals, very rich in minerals. And yet, it's one of the poorest countries on the continent. It's strange that a continent so rich, a continent that everybody wants to be part of, still has some of the poorest people on the planet. Now let's back to the index. The index I spoke of, they study modern slavery. You didn't know such a thing exists? It does. And according to this particular global slavery index, this country has an estimated number of 90,000 slaves.
Wow.
If the proverb were from Kenya, I would have given you the Kenyan index. But we are not in Kenya this week. Now the proverb, if you watch your pot, your food will not burn. As I mentioned in the previous hours, the pot I'm referring to here is not the pot belly. I am referring to that utensil that you use for cooking, pot. And for those who are inclined towards focusing on extreme infinity, it's not something you smoke either.
Extreme infinity, all right.
Yes. Now the meaning. What do you think this proverb is trying to tell us? How do you interpret the meaning of this proverb?
For me, I interpret it as when we watch what we are supposed to do, if that is my daily thing or that is what I find important, whatever I'm doing will not go to loss.
Good.
Okay. What about you, Dr.
For me, it comes down to one word: focus on what it is that you're doing and what you're delivering, and it will go right. You don't focus, you lose it.
Absolutely.
Spot on.
Indeed.
Spot on.
The way to go.
Yes.
For sure. Autism. When we started talking about autism on this side of the pond, it's possible that very, very many a child, young adults had already suffered the throes of autism for a very long time. And it was crazy, really, but unbeknownst to us of what it was. But we want to start really to look at what autism is before we even start to look at what the other side of it is, and the burden that it has in this country and what it is that now that we are dealing with. There have been many other tags that have been given to it, different kinds of autism and what different people suffer from. But we want to start today with a few definitions of what autism is and how it presents itself and the burden that we see of it in Kenya today. Let's start with you, Dr.
Thank you so much for that. Let me start by saying that I'm also a parent of two daughters on the autism spectrum. So for me, the definition changes from the medical to the lived experience. It comes with challenges of communication, behavior challenges, and just simply fitting into what society considers, for lack of a better word, normal. If I was to define autism, I'd say a beautiful brain that is all colors you can think of. Yeah, it's you think it's a crown day for Splash, and that's where I'll be in terms of that definition. And it's unique to each and every individual. There is no one clear definition that applies to all autistics. What applies on my first daughter doesn't apply on my second.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go into a little bit of detail for you then. So, I mean, you are a health management expert. So also then dealing with two children, how did you note that your children, or start with the first child, your first daughter, how did you know that she was autistic, or was that on the autism spectrum?
With all my knowledge, it took a friend to actually point it out. You know, as a parent, I was in denial. I had seen the flags. One was she was on tippy toes. So she'd walk on her tippy toes. She would not want company. She would isolate. And also she was nonverbal at an age where she should have at least had a few words, which was 4 years by then. But then I had a pediatrician who was telling me she's just a slow developer. She'll get there. So it took a while to get that diagnosis in place. Also the fact that at that point in Kenya, we did not have developmental pediatricians. So it took a while. But my clear flag, my very first clear flag was her doing a typical walk through the house. Yeah.
And it wasn't once?
No.
It was the norm for her.
It was the norm for her. Even today when she gets overwhelmed, we just notice, oops, she's on her tippy toes. And by the way, she's 12 today.
Okay.
Yeah.
She's 12. Okay.
But let me ask, as a parent, as a doctor, what is it that influenced what you call your denial?
Let's first get a clarity. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a healthcare manager. I'm more in public health than medical health. The denial is everybody has that dream when they brought their child home. I came home with a perfect child. She's called an 8 out of 10 on the Apaga scale. So I did not expect to get ambushed at 18 months. And then I go like, nah. And then also the experts that you are relying on. Because I was seeing one of the top 3 pediatricians in this country. And, you tend to rely on experts. Or to some extent. Yes, I could see, but then the expert goes, there's this other angle. So I was in denial for about 2 years and 7 months. Yeah.
Okay. And then what happened when your second child?
With the second one, the denial was the fact that I thought she was imitating her other sister.
Okay.
Yeah, child copies the next. But hers were a bit obvious. She was silent. She started speaking now at the age of, when she was about 7, 8. She never held eye contact completely throughout her breastfeeding stages. I had a child who was not interested in me. She wasn't interested in anyone around her. Unless you had something she wanted, she didn't care. To date, she doesn't engage willingly. And then she kept closing her eyes and ears. Different noises were an attack on her. So she would flip out. Then she had, at the age of 2, she would deliberately search for walls to bang her head. So that was my flags.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I want to now, obviously we're going to go back and forth. So Perpetua, you run an organization that we want to know a little bit about what you do and how you've come into contact with autism and what your experience has been. And we're going to be able to link these two, obviously, at some point.
Thank you very much. The organization I run deals with occupational therapy. By profession, I'm an occupational therapist, and I work with children. And how I interact with autism is when the children come into our centers, we visit them in their schools, we visit them in their homes. We see them at centers, let's say, for example, NGOs that have children on the spectrum. So we help them to be able to get in touch or be able to catch up with their milestones. If they have developmental delays, if they have the sensory issues Dr. Jane has mentioned, the closing of their ears, the sensitivity to light, we look for ways for the environment to accommodate them. Yeah. So we do a lot of environmental modification. And also what I do on the side, I also volunteer in associations. There's one called Eastern African Alliance of Childhood Disability. So within such organizations, we do a lot of advocacy. We do a lot of education session for parents. We do a lot of activities that will be able to bring awareness about autism and how well to work with individuals with autism. Because not only children, we have adults, adolescents who are on the spectrum, and we have to find a way to be able to accommodate them and work with them.
So, what have you seen? Have parents really started to bring their children to what many call special schools? Is there an acceptance of the fact that, these children are different and that they're on the spectrum, with a beautiful mind? Do we see that now there's more of acceptance of that and saying there's something that needs to be done in terms of occupational therapy?
In terms of occupational therapy, what I'm seeing is a lot of advocacy by parents. Parents like Dr. Jane and many other doctors are advocating. So the more the advocacy, the more the access to some extent. Yet the fight still goes on in terms of advocacy. So in terms of special school, not all children on the spectrum need special schools.
Okay.
And ideally, we should have inclusive environments that we don't always think about sending them to special schools. Because once a school is inclusive and they are open, which I've seen, we can accommodate all the children. And if we think about levels, all students on the autism spectrum, let's say level 1, level 2, level 3 aspects of severity, they can all access our schools. So it's just acceptance. But also there's aspects of resources. When we think about our public schools, we do not have all the resources we need to be able to support them. Let's look at just one example of Dr. Jane. She has mentioned sound sensitivity. Imagine our class of students, of 70 students in a class. A child with sound sensitivity basically will not learn the entire day. They'll spend their day out, or they'll be in the class, but they won't learn. So there's the aspect of resourcing, there's the aspect of ability of the teachers to be able to handle them, being able to know what to do with a child on the spectrum, and even just the capacity. If you have many students, it's impossible to just focus on one or two. And even have minders. Do we have minders within our systems to be able to stay with these children, help them achieve? Is the system inclusive? And even when it comes to exams and accommodations, which Dr. Jane can be able to expound on. But there's a lot. But in terms of occupational therapy, also are our schools able to have occupational therapy as part of their staff members, even from a public perspective? Can we have rehab professionals within the school system to be able to offer the needed services at that moment? Because sometimes it doesn't have to inconvenience the student, that the parent has to look for time to bring them to a center. We can have occupational therapists within the school. Can it be part of what the government can offer?
Yeah. You know, you've introduced an interesting topic
Absolutely.
Here with education. We have schools that we refer to as special schools in this country. There have been discussions about integrating them so that the children who are in special schools can actually get to a point where they're in these integrated schools where they're with other children who one could argue don't have special needs. Now, special needs, if they're physical, they are obvious, you can see it. Special needs, if it affects someone's mind and the functions of the nervous system and their being as a whole, not so. Now, from what you've observed, do we have teachers or do we have a training that in our education system that focuses on understanding? Most people who I think have some sort of training are in so-called special schools. Autism is very special because of the spectrum. You're agreeing with me, I can see.
Yes.
And you're waiting for me to ask the question.
Yes.
We're waiting for the question.
No, I wanted that to sink first.
Yes.
Given the spectrum, how do you then determine? Because at a certain age, parents will take children to school. How then do you determine that this child actually needs special attention? And how do you ensure the teachers have that knowledge? Now, this is a tall order. The ability to describe and to understand that perhaps this child needs to be managed differently. Children who are dyslexic have had issues. And they tell the story later on in life. And it takes time before it's exactly understood that the way this child's brain is wired is different from the way other people's brains are wired. How do we marry the education system, your work, and the understanding that you need to mesh this with parents? Because there are many needs that you cannot, as a parent, understand. If the child goes to school, the school will be in a far better position to inform you.
Yes.
I've actually asked the question.
Yes. It's a tall order, because one, we start with the parent, the identification that my child actually needs any form of extra support. It starts with a lot of awareness to be able to understand what are the milestones that my child has hit and what have they missed. So not many parents are in a position to know what they have missed, especially in the unseen, if I can say loosely, quotely, the unseen disabilities. And that is what we see in the autism world. It is unseen until you meet someone who will tell you this is where the challenge is. So first is the hit and miss. What have they hit? What have they missed? So that's the first part where the parent needs to be able to know. Because the parents, once they know that they can push a lot of advocacy and a lot of support for their children. So once the parent knows and they want to take their children to school, or if they still don't know and they have taken their child to school, then there's the aspect of the teacher being able to identify. I'll allow Dr. Jane to intervene and mention aspects of what is happening within the education system. They have done a lot of advocacy within that world, and she can be able to share what is currently there and what the teachers have done. But I'll jump into now the occupational bit, where I'll mention aspects of what synergy we can have. The synergy can start from the ministries, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, because sometimes you feel like there's a lot of back and forth. Who should be employing the OTs? Who should be taking the OTs to the school? Is it the Ministry of Education? Is it the Ministry of Health? Then who will be able to pay for them? Which budget is already allocated? Is it the Ministry of Education? Is it the Ministry of Health? Is it gender? So there's the aspect of who will employ us within those spaces, and also who will volunteer of our services in those spaces, who will pay for us to do those services in those spaces. Do we have funding in those places where we can say we'll be able to impact the lives of these children? But allow me to take it back to Dr. Jane when it comes to the education and what the teachers currently know and what are the gaps.
I think, Doctor, even before you respond to her, could also just respond to the fact that if there is any data to help in decisions being made by be it Ministry of Education or Ministry of Health, because absence of data would not inform the severity henceforth to be able to make decisions around that.
Okay. And let me start with your question. When it comes to data, the government of Kenya does not have data. And they missed the best opportunity to collect that data, which was the last immediate census. Because as a parent, I'm the one who actually had to show the enumerator where to put data on my kids on the side. But then when the whole report came out, there was no data. But within us, among parents and our support networks, we have the data. Yeah, I can tell you how many kids born between this year to this year have been diagnosed. But this data, we actually wait for the parent to register with a platform. Like a number of us administrate something called Through the Roof. It's a parent support network where we share information, where we advise each other. So when you come on, we get your data. So I do know right now, I can tell you about 115,000 children on the spectrum. I can tell you that those have, how many of them are single parent homes, or how many are not single parent homes, how many are accessing occupational therapy, how many are accessing formal education, and how many are not. That data is available, but among us parents. Yeah, and we're just one. There are others that work on that. Okay, and then we even take it further that we have created international networks among us, where we will talk to Egypt and ask them, how are you guys handling this experience? Tanzania, how are you doing this? And the culmination of that, which you will see, and it's part of why we are here today, is we have somebody like the Professor Bukusi, who we call Grandma of Autism, doing a hike to raise awareness. I mean, she is a grandmother. That tells you how old her children are for her to come back and raise awareness on autism. Then, on top of that, we have a Pan-African Congress on Autism being hosted by the Kenya Institute of Special Education. But it's a parent-led initiative. The parents came together and said, we need to sit and find out how do we support each other across the continent to get these services, yeah? So that's where it is. Now, when it comes to education, I'll say this is where we need to start, not even at education, at health. When a child is born and you're going to the mother-child health clinics, you have this booklet that has a graph. That is your first identifier if your child is within the graphs of milestones. Yeah, that is a clearly enumerated tool by pediatrics. So if your child is below or above, it's not just about nutrition, it's about developmental goals. When was your first social smile? When did you hold the pen? When did you sit up on your own? All those will come into factor to help the diagnosis process. Now, unfortunately, for some reason after COVID, these clinics are not happening the way they should. So we have a lot of children who fall through those cracks, and the parents will take them to school early 2.9, 3 years, simply to get a break, not because it's time to take the child to school. And then the other thing is that most of our teachers will think of your child as a problem, not as a challenge that needs to be identified and supported. While the Kenya Institute of Special Education, Kenyatta University, Maseno University are doing a lot on training the teachers, you can have the tools, but you also have to be willing. Okay, that lacks a lot. So you'll find Kenya Institute of Special Education has a whole program on autism. Yeah. Kenyatta University has it as a master's program for their special needs educators. So you are going further into saying how you handle the classroom for this particular person. But then also the bigger challenge is there is no curriculum that is adjusted the way they need it. Yeah. My children go into an inclusive school. They study with the rest in class. There are times they have to step away from class to go to the resource room with their special needs teacher.
Sure.
But the special needs teacher is in class.
Got it.
Alongside the main teacher of the subject, helping break down what the teacher is teaching, if they can understand it. Or if they can over-understand it, keep ahead of them. Because what most people tend to think is that if you're diagnosed autistic, you're not smart. And that's a very bad misconception.
We have maybe some of the smartest, most intelligent folks.
Just like every other population, there's a whole skew line. There are those who will be on the lowest of the spectrum, there are those who will be on the extreme high, and there are those who will be on the average. Now, the ones who are on the extreme top and the middle are the ones who get lost in this system, because everybody, including our education system, the Kenyan one, considers them to be dumb. Even our own law has very derogatory words addressing autistic kids, because there's the whole mental thing. But Kenya Institute of Special Education and a number of universities are really working to equip. But this comes on the body of parents calling for it and empowering them, and even parents going back to school to simply get empowered so that you can support the next one
and show the way.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a break at this point. We're talking with Perpetua Mondi and Dr. Jane Moiruri. We're looking at the other side of autism this morning. We're going to come back because in as much as we can share our experiences, there are other people on the other end of it who are saying, is it possibly what I could be going through and I do not know? So this serves as an information, conversation, discourse for them as well. So we'll come back and delve into some of those things when we come back from the break. It's 26 minutes to 10.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. The weather with SpiceFM.
Partly sunny conditions at 19 in Nairobi. We'll see highs of 25 and highs of 26 in a mostly cloudy. In Nakuru at 19. It's 21 and sunny in Nyeri. 20 and sunny conditions into Eldoret. Mombasa sunny at 30 with 30 and sunny conditions in Malindi. 25 and sunny in Kisumu with highs of 30, while at 24 Kakamega is sunny going to highs of 29. It's 22 and sunny into Kampala, where at 29 it is sunny in Dar es Salaam. 19 and sunny in Johannesburg, while at 30 it is partly sunny in Mogadishu. Addis Ababa at 18 is sunny, while Lagos at 28 is sunny, and Kinshasa at 25 is cloudy.
Spice up your life.
All right, we're coming to the tail end of traffic hour this Tuesday morning, and we can see the signs on the roads as well because traffic is starting to reduce significantly. We just have a little bit of that left on the Thika Superhighway as you approach Survey and then get towards the Pangani Underpass. And on the Eastern Bypass, that's more or less come to an end. Whatever's crossing over from Jiru past that Roy Junction and then out onto Kangunda Road also starting to reduce significantly. Let's take a look at what's coming out of Westlands, Spring Valley, Lower Kabete, and all of this is also looking a lot better. So you get in and out of the city without too much of an issue, at least not now. Let's see what happens through the day, through the morning. Talk to us, SpiceFM KE on X.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
at now 24 minutes to 10. We're talking this morning with the founder of Dynamic Occupational Therapy Limited, Perpetua Mondi, and healthcare management expert Dr. Jane Moirori, and we're looking at the other side of autism and just to look at your experiences. And I thought it was just interesting that the numbers that we have in Kenya are from numbers of parents who registered their children, that we don't have collective data at the national level. And this is, I guess, a shout out because one would also want to understand the burden of autism in the country. Do we have those numbers before I go to that? Do we know? We don't know what that is. We'd not be able to collect that. Whereas with others, we can. That you say, okay, well, X number of people, 3 in every 5, for example, 1 in every 4 women will have breast cancer or cervical cancer kind of thing. You see? So there are many, just from personal stories of people who have dealt with situations at home, they don't know what they are, that have turned out to be autism later. And you talk about level 1, 2, and 3. Just trying to understand, if you have a child at home who's at level 1, what would you be knowing? What would you see? If you had a child who was already at level 2, if you had a child who was at level 3, I think shared amongst us, what are some of the things that you would see? Because there's some folks who are not quite sure what's going on and they have these situations at home.
Do you want to take that? Yeah, I would leave you to take that because you have like a really hands-on experience and you can be able to expound more on that.
Okay, for level 3, let's start from the worst scenario to the better scenario of this spectrum. Level 3 is a child who at age 2 loses all their milestones or has not achieved any. And let's track them to the age of 5. Things that a child should be able to do, like button up a shirt, put on a shoe, toilet train, will not be happening. They'll be extremely dependent. Here in Kenya, we say severely. Yeah, that's the government term, yeah, severely disabled. So because they'll be fully dependent on you, they may not even be able to communicate. Probably they'll have to pull you around. They'll be having extreme meltdowns. People think it's tantrums, and this is the community that people say badly brought up, bad behavior. Yes, that's the one. So it's easy to identify at 3. At 2 will be minimal on achieving their milestones, like maybe they might feed themselves, may not be toilet trained by the age of 5, will probably choose their own presence than integrate with others. You know, those behaviors, especially for girls, this becomes dangerous because here in Africa we say quiet girl, doesn't talk too much, doesn't hold eye contact. That's a properly brought up girl. Unfortunately, mom and dad, that might be autism looking at you. They may have issues with food. Yeah, they're extremely picky. That probably you find they can only tolerate one food texture or one food taste. Comes to smells. So those, if they end up in the hands of a teacher who's aware or a health professional who's aware, easy to identify. Now comes to level 1. My goodness, this one's mask. Yeah, they're efficient. They take care of themselves. They can do everything within boundaries. Yeah, it's very hard to tell a level 1. Because they'll be super smart, most of them, and maybe they might be hyper. They may be tunnel focused. Yeah, if they're into IT, they're into IT. If they're into music, they're into music. They'll be able to look at you, copy your mannerisms, and move on with life. So nobody will figure out that they didn't know. Or they are really, but then again, it has an effect on their mental health because trying to hide who you are to cope with societal boundaries then becomes an issue. These are the hardest to identify, yeah, and they can go through life undiagnosed and unsupported, yeah, and with a lot of research going into this area, we are finding that a lot of them become the very smart lawyers, very smart doctors who get schizophrenia and bipolar because of trying to, stick to what society expects of them, yeah.
Which brings us to the next question in terms of having trained professionals who can flag this at an early age. Do we have enough that could be able to sustain the numbers in the country?
We are a country of 3 developmental pediatricians. Qualified developmental pediatricians. I think we're getting a 4th one coming out of South Africa. She's just finished her training. Now, this is the job that works very hard because then some of them fall through the cracks and end up at the OTs occupational therapists trying to tell parents, this is where we are. And then Kenyans being Kenyans, we've realized that there is a market for us here. So we have a lot of quacks trying to fit that space. So if you're a new parent, you don't understand that autism is not a disease that you need to cure, you'll be scammed from here to kingdom back. Yeah, and that's why we have platforms where we talk to each other. Those of us who've gone through this, those of us who've been here, I've been at this for 12 years. Yeah, she's been here longer than me. So we try talking to the parents who just got a diagnosis. We have that network with with some of the doctors that a parent will come, they'll be told this is where your child stands at. Would you mind joining a support group? And then they'll be given the number of myself, Jackie Mathaga, Christine Motena. We are about 11 admins on Through the Roof, and it's up to the parent to reach out. But sometimes even the doctor thinks this one needs to be reached out to, so they'll send the number over to us, and we'll have this conversation back and forth, just trying to get you comfortable that this journey is here.
We have many pediatricians in the country. Newborn pediatricians. Can one detect any signs of the development of autism in a child who is a toddler?
At 18 months. That's the earliest, because that's when the milestone starts being clearly obvious, on a clinical platform. The pediatricians are now being trained post their qualifying as pediatricians. EAC's East African Academy of Childhood Disabilities does a lot of trainings together with the Kenya Pediatrics Association, because they know they are limited. There are 3 of them right now in the country. They can't take on everyone. So they are spreading the knowledge to their colleagues so that their colleagues can grab the ones who don't turn up at their offices.
Right. I reckon that there are adults today who are autistic, who were never diagnosed, and probably have a difficult time being able to operate, in a quote-unquote an unnoticed way. What are some of the things that we would see in an adult today that could possibly point you in that direction?
There's the aspect of social skills. You'll find we have quote-unquote norms, so they don't really align to the norms. So it's an adult who really is not interested in small conversations, unless you're talking something that is in line with what they want or they really do as a day-to-day activity. If you talk to him about tech, you'll talk till morning. But talk about the weather, you'll be left there. So the aspects of the conversation and being able to have that, the norms, but I use that loosely, because what is norm? Norm is them. For them, that's their norm. For us, this is relative. Our norm. It's relative. Yeah. So it's those aspects of social. There's also sensory challenges. You'll find there are those who might not be comfortable in spaces where there's a lot of light, a lot of noise. Some it's clothing. There are those you'll find they have only one cloth texture in their wardrobe. And they are quite comfortable with that clothing texture. If you change it, they will not go to work, or they will not really align. There's the aspect of being able to have things in a certain order, in a certain way. And if you don't do it in that way, they will not be able to work, and they will not be able to, this newspaper has to be in this position before I start my work. So they have a certain rigid routines, if I can say, very rigid routines.
And that characterizes how they go about their business.
Yes, they have a certain,
So if I'm fastidious and I like things in a certain way, I don't have signs of autism.
So then there are checklists. So there'll be checklists of the communication. So we have to have 3 aspects: the communication, there's the rigidity and the rigid routines, and there's one more I'm missing out.
The flexibility.
Flexibility. Yes. So you have to have a checklist. It has to tick all 3. It's not just one.
Right.
Yeah.
And it comes from communication, behavior, interaction. Each of them has a checklist, because it's your lack of this that qualifies you to be autistic. Remember that some of the strains that will be taken for autistic could also be OCD.
And who is OCD?
Yes, order compulsive disorder. Yes, order compulsive disorder. And a lot of autistics have it.
What again? Order?
So it's like a square and rectangle. Not everybody who has OCD is autistic, and not everybody who's autistic has OCD.
Repeat again. You said OCD is what again?
Order compulsive disorder.
Somebody who...
You want things in a certain particular order, always.
Military precision.
And it affects you if it's... Because there are those who want it in a certain way, but they are flexible. If it's not that way, it's okay. But for you, it has to be this order, and it has to be this order, and it just has to be this order.
Or you have a meltdown.
Yeah. You can't focus, you can't work.
How do you determine that somebody has a meltdown?
Yeah.
Oh, meltdown, if I can just say it this way, it is when it's a volcanic eruption in your brain and it can't calm down as fast as you want it because something didn't go in a certain way, or something is not just happening how you want. So it just doesn't, it can't just go away. A meltdown never goes away, just like a volcano. We just don't wish a volcano. It has to finish what it's doing. Then now we say, okay, what's the damage? So that's a meltdown, if I can describe it in a different way.
Let me just paint a picture of someone who considers themselves OCD. I'm used to this remote being here facing this side. It is moved and I know it was moved. I go to sleep and I have to wake up to come return it to that position.
Are you telling us about things that you deal with, Janet?
It has happened once, so
no, that isn't OCD. What did you eat before you went to sleep?
Would that qualify as someone who's autistic?
If not really autistic qualification, but you'll find that now the experts who now are able to give us the diagnosis are those who Dr. Jane has said, the developmental pediatrician, we have the psychiatrist,
and we have the neurologists.
Yes. So we have those three. Those are the three main ones. For us, we know some of the symptoms and red flags, but we can't really put a diagnosis onto it. But we now know the red flags. But there's the aspect of also with the sensory aspect, and even with the meltdown, there are triggers. Children who are on the spectrum, individuals who are on the spectrum, it's not just a meltdown for nothing. There has to be a trigger. Something happened for that meltdown. And for us to really help them, we really have to identify what was the trigger, how do we make it better, and even aspects of discipline. You cannot discipline a meltdown the same way as a different child. You have to find a way of identifying what was the trigger. And that's the challenge also in our education system, where the teachers find it very hard to identify what was the trigger for this behavior. What made this child scream and endlessly for this lesson? Was it because the texture of the chair, you can't even imagine, you can feel the texture of a chair. The texture of the chair was not comfortable for them. Was it that sound frequency of the teacher's voice, which you can't do anything about, that was affecting this child's ear? For the whole lesson, they can't really focus on this teacher. Yeah.
So this demonstration of hypersensitivity is why you need a neurologist.
The occupational therapist, because the aspect of the how you respond to the sensory factors, we can find ways around it. How do we help the environment, or how do we help you adapt? If I can give you that one, if you have noise cancellation headphones, you can still hear, but now some frequencies are removed. It's not as heavy as it comes when you have the noise cancellation headphones.
Right.
If there's environmental modification, if you're moved from the sitting position of the child who's very chatty and very noisy and always moving their desk, and you're positioned in a different place, that makes it easier for you. If you're an adult, if you're working in a room, if you can get a space where it's less noisy, or I've seen in certain settings where the student is actually allowed to have acoustic music on their headphones, but the teacher is still teaching, but they're positioned now where they can still see the teacher, so it cancels out any other thing.
So noise seems to be a big issue.
Not really. It's just one example.
Okay.
Light can be one.
Okay.
Texture can be one. Food texture.
Flashing images also.
Texture is the biggest. Texture is the biggest because it affects food, it affects space, it affects clothing.
Comfort.
Yes, comfort. Yeah.
So that's interesting. So, I mean, Jane, for you, because obviously you've managed your children, what are things that you had to do to manage the situation? Because, again, we're talking about a spectrum and places at different points where, individuals can be affected. We're not talking about a disease that you can cure or treat with medication, right? So what kind of management mechanisms do you have in place to make life more comfortable for your girls, and then also to then be able to interact in their space? Because oftentimes we think, make it easier for that child to interact in our space, but how about making it easier for for you to enter into their space? What are some of the things that you had to do and that other parents have to do?
for me, because both of them are different, I had to accommodate each and every one of them. And the first rule in my house is it's their space, not your space.
There you go.
If you can't live in their space, please leave. That's clear. The first thing we had to do was move into our own compound, our own secure compound. Our youngest is an eloper. Eloper are kids who just go. And they don't have a reverse gear or a where am I? They just want to explore. So we had to have that. The second thing we had to have trained guard dogs. These guard dogs will protect them. So we know when my girls need, actually the youngest one, needs to be supported. So the dogs are there. We have noise cancellation headphones in the house. Yeah. My worst experience was when somebody grabbed them in town thinking they're stealing some good piece of Beats headphones. And our world came to an end. So whatever we were going to do had to come to an end. I had to crawl on the floor with her to keep her safe until we could get a way to protect her ears and then come home. Yeah. The other one is when they like our food, because once they like our food, we stock up. Whether it's healthy, not healthy, it's not our problem. The bottom line is we're not running out of that food. We also have block colors in the house, and our lights are extremely non-existent. We have very dim lights. Yeah, the youngest, if the lights are too bright, she'll just take one of the usual, these colored mugs and just plug the bulb in, and she has her dull room. So we have all of that. We have swings. At some point we had a trampoline in the compound. Now we have hammocks and swings that they get to do. And then when it comes to the house safety, the one thing I don't have on all doors is locks. We don't have a single lock. You're in my house, you're going to the bathroom, you need to keep your legs straight up because you're going to at some point have a visitor, so you need to block that bathroom because they've taught us early on enough that this is dangerous. Anything from knives to chemicals to detergents to bathing soaps.
You keep away.
Then the lock and key, you think I am running a Fort Knox in my house. I mean, a bar of soap. Somebody will have, there's something called pica, which is eating things that have no benefit to you. Yeah, they tend to do that. One tends to do that a lot. One is very emotional, so you have to leave her things the way she's left them, and she doesn't share.
Which brings us to the conversation around the stigma around autistic children, and then there is the fact that the high cost of care, as you just stated, is up on the roof, and the need for the government to intentionally plug into this conversation.
Stigma is there, and stigma is with ourselves as parents. Stigma is also within the medical profession. Stigma is with our teachers. Stigma is in our churches or religious bodies. Stigma is in our cultures, how we embrace people who are abled differently. So stigma is all around us, and the only way we can be able to first just work with stigma is just to understand what people have. Be that kind person who will just take time to understand what is it that this child has. Ask the parent, how are you? Is there a way I can help you? What could be the challenge with the child, or how is the child's life? What is happening? And many times I feel parents, if asked in a nice way, are willing to explain.
Right.
Are able to tell you and they're able to educate. So the stigma is all about us being able to just ask those questions. Why is this child acting this way? What would be causing them to act this way? How can I make it better for them? What can I do to improve this parent's life? You can imagine an airport scenario where there is Dr. Jane trying to board an airplane. There's a lot of noise around her. You can just be able to just say, can I help you with a bag? Can I pull your bag?
What happens to a child who on the spectrum who is not managed? And I want to segue because I'm still at that place where, Jane, bless God that you have been privileged to the point where you can do the things that you talk about, being able to be in an own compound. I don't think that has been easy at all. It must have been a huge burden when we're talking about financial resource, we're talking about community resource, we're talking about people resource, for the buffering, for the support, to be able to do that. Some of the things that you talk about, room not under lock and key, locking away certain things, having to have special food on stock. It's not cheap either. So what happens to the child then who is not supported? And we're talking about, little to no income, And so from that point, think about it. Imagine if you couldn't do that, and then not imagine, but look at the reality of those parents who can't. We'll start with you, Jane.
I don't have to imagine it because I see it. We intervene a lot. We try to get support for that situation a lot, and sometimes it just doesn't hack it. Okay, the scenarios are sad. Okay, because that child becomes a wasted human being, despite whatever potential they have had. Because some parents have these two choices: starve, murder your child, or lock up your child in a house and go look for that daily bread. And then the community doesn't understand why you're locking up a child. You're locking up that child for their safety. Okay? The society will watch you struggle. They will never say, can we help? Okay? And then most of us have been gaslighted. You're very strong. You were chosen by God. God knew what he was doing when he was doing this. So what that does, it makes you not ask for help. Yeah? And I'm talking from experience. You don't ask for help. So if somebody doesn't step into your circle and say, hey, what do you need? I'm going to give you an actual scenario that happened in Uasin Gishu, and I know you guys covered it up. Covered the story, not covered it up. You covered the story. A lady who had a cerebral palsy child, and it took the neighbors 4 days to realize this child is dead. Yeah. And they tried mob justing the lady. And then the lady, she's here in Langata Women's right now. And when we went to visit her as other parents, because we understood her pain, do you know what she told us? Please leave me here. Because we had a lawyer. With this was moment, she must have snapped at some point. She could not sleep, could not shower. There was nobody telling her, okay, let me watch your kid. Even if we make mistakes, you take a bath. Yes. Have a meal. Yeah, that was not happening for her. So she told us, I'm told when time to wake up, when to sleep. Kindly leave me here for a while. Yeah. So we went on to the prison psychiatrist and told us, I need to work with her for a very long time for her to accept that life has to move on. Yeah, we don't have the resources to keep taking care of everyone, but that's the sad reality. The other one is you will one day leave your compound, loiter in the streets in your village. Your villagers know you, but they will be the ones murdering you in the mob justice or lynching you. This has happened in Kenol. Somebody they knew was part of them, had grown in the middle of them. One day he picked a fruit and that was the end of him. And then the same people went and told the mother at her stall, your son is being burnt over there. That's simple. So that happens. Now, going back to your question on where the government is plugging in, politics aside, we need the laws that are in place to take care of the caregiver and the parent, the ones who are taking care. And Honorable Crystal Lasige has put a bill in Parliament. It's gone through all its motion. It's waiting for the presidential assent. Then we wait for the tools on how to be put in place. When you're blind and you're working, your first 150,000 salary is tax-free. They start taxing you at 151. So what we are asking is, why don't you give me, the parent, the same benefit? Because 150,000 no tax, that's 45,000. 45,000, those are how many sessions of occupational therapy? Yeah? I'll be able to do more than the one I do. Yeah. I'll be able to get more support for that child. And those who are in business, then what support comes in? Sure. Then the other thing is the government needs to stop working in silos. They need to have an integration of the services they're delivering. Yeah. We have the National Council of People with Disability. We have the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. We have KISE. We have the Ministry of Gender, we have the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Infrastructure. They need to sit together and agree what are they delivering. They all know they're delivering ramps for the wheelchair guy. But what are they delivering to allow the autistic person who can work to work here? We're seeing more and more adults with autism who have had parental support. The parents never gave up working. If you want to see a good example, step into KISE. They have a lot of them. Step into Safaricom. They have a lot of them, but it has a lot of support.
Indeed. Yeah. Look, these are not conversations that we can pack into 1 hour. There's too much that needs to be addressed, but they are conversations that we need to keep happening. Somebody will be helped. And if it's one person for every session that we do, it is necessary that we do. And we want to thank both of you for being here this morning and being so open about your experience and also about what you would like to see in terms of, getting help for those. Autism, a big issue that we can't not talk about. So, Dr. Jane Moiruri, Perpetual Mondi, thank you for being here this morning. Thank you for being part of Kenya's biggest conversation this Tuesday. We'll do it again tomorrow, God willing, 6 a.m. Good morning now. It's 10 a.m.
Sugar and spice and everything.
spice up your life.
Good morning, this is the News Wire. I'm Leah Ubaga. The interviews for the position of the chairman of the IEBC continue for the second day today, appearing before the selection panel for the chairman and 6 commissioners of the commission. The candidate for the chairman